The Noble Queen, a Shadow Slave Fanfic Chapter 226-250. Then how? Noble's mind spun for a moment. How had Amira known that Noble had taken one of the books? Was she bluffing to force her niece to defend herself? Had Amira found the book on the ground and made assumptions? Or had Noble's floating book trick not been convincing enough, and the rumor spread that she was sneaking things out of the library? Whatever the answer, Noble could feel that Droon was being truthful about it not being him. My mistake, Noble winced. Could you point me in the direction of the records by King Kron? The official historical records are in the archive. Droon pointed to the area of the library where Noble and Council had spent weeks studying. If you want the King's journals, Her Grace would be the one to ask. Are you saying you don't know where they are? Sarai tried to sound haughty. Surely a librarian of your caliber must know where every book is placed. Droon studied the redhead's face before his eyes darted away. Perhaps Her Grace does not remember, but you took those books and have not returned them. The two ladies exchanged glances. How long ago was this? Noble asked quickly. Why, it was the morning of the, centennial celebration. Perhaps the books are mixed with the others you requested. Droon pressed his lips shut, knowing he had likely angered the former queen for calling her careless. His knees bent, and he looked like he might faint. Thank you, Droon, that will be all for now. Noble released the librarian before she needed to use her ability to lift him from the floor. He bowed quickly and rushed from the room like it was on fire. Or like he was about to be. Sarai shut the door behind him and their exit sealed seamlessly. What do you want to do now? She asked her friend. Noble thought for a moment. We can search your room later for the books, though if Amira took them then there is no telling where they might be. For now, let's look at what is here and see if there is anything else obvious we can glean. Noble pointed to the books next to where Amira's journals must have been kept. Do you want to continue to look at the most recent books while I look at the oldest ones? We will eventually meet in the middle then. That's as good of a plan as any. Assuming you can stay. Sarai gave her a meaningful look. You cannot hide from your official duties, you know. I have an appointment after lunch with General Theo and a few other advisors about what to do moving forward. I would be lying if I said I am looking forward to it. I have seen how much my father and Fort have struggled with how things should be run and they only had a department or directorate to run. But a whole country. I would rather hide out here with you. Noble smiled faintly. Just because things needed to be done did not mean she wanted to do them. Keeping the kingdom running while they finished out the nightmare was not only necessary. It was vital. Even if it wouldn't impact her final evaluation, which Noble was sure it would, having starving citizens or unorganized troops due to Noble's negligence would not go well when the Lord of the Mountain finally came. And he would come. If nothing else, they would find a way to lure him. I will be happy to have you as long as you are able. Sarai picked up a book and brushed the dust from the top. I will call you if I find anything. Parting ways, the two ladies went to work. While Sarai found a chair and made herself comfortable, Noble went in search of the oldest of the tomes. They must be near the back wall. With a glance to make sure her friend was doing well, the floating awakened drifted toward the rear of the hidden library. Or so she thought. Oh, Noble gasped, earning a quick response from Sarai. Are you okay? The redhead came with a sword already manifesting in her hand. Yes and no, Noble responded, pointing. What the woman had thought was the back wall had a small doorway into an even bigger chamber. The amount of books in the second room dwarfed the first many times over. Whoa! Sarai's eyes went wide. How can all this even be stored inside the palace? Are we even in the palace? Noble wondered. I think those runes do more than just protect this place from outsiders. It was possible that somehow the palace was formed around this immense space, but something in Noble had felt off since the moment they entered the library. It was like this place was a dimension of its own. This is insane. What I thought would take a few days may take weeks, Noble sighed. Which is when the horde should be set to arrive again, with or without their master. We will work quickly then. Though I do wish Nickel were here to pick out what books he thinks are important again. The redhead pursed her lips. Knowing which books to skip entirely would be helpful. The information they sought was surely read by more than just the monarch who wrote it. We will just have to fend for ourselves and do our best to find what Amira hid. Maybe she hid them in plain sight here. The covers are yellow and look very worn. Noble was pretty sure that the forbidden knowledge would have been taken to a new place, but it couldn't hurt to at least check. I'll look while I read. Sarai returned to her post, leaving Noble to peruse the shelves silently. Floating up and down the aisles grew tedious, though Noble did find the spot where the books should be. A multi-level gap on one set of shelves was clear of dust. Noble looked at the books on either side briefly and confirmed they were around the same time period. Part of the professor wanted to stop and look at these journals more deeply right away. It made sense logically that whatever was hidden in the missing journals might be hinted at either by the king's predecessor or successor. But that was not the plan she had proposed to Sarai. I will be back to visit you in a little bit. Noble turned away and eventually found the deepest recesses of the royal library. The kings and queens of old were quite verbose, and the journals had somehow been kept in excellent condition in this strange space. Noble pulled out the very first book and brushed off the thick layer of dust. No one had been here in quite a while. As soon as she opened the book, Noble realized why. She frowned. The words were translated by the spell as usual, but they still read very strangely. If Noble had thought to compare it, it would have been like trying to read Old English through a modern lens. No, that wasn't quite right. Noble could still understand what was being said, it was just very slow going. The information was about how the first king had conquered the land with the help of his brother, who then moved northward to make a home of his own with a queen of rare beauty. Though the queen had far more land and influence than the king of Crestfall, the two groups lived in harmony. The process to set up the first ruler's city kingdom was painstaking. Setting up a workable government usually is. After over an hour of grueling focus, Noble felt herself begin to drift off to sleep. She was startled by Sarai's voice. I solved a mystery. Noble received her friend's news with relieved excitement. She hurried toward her. You found something about the heart or the tyrant? Goodness no, Sarai blushed. But I did find out about these. The redhead touched her jewelry. Amira's father, Brenna's grandfather, talks about the necklace here and bracelets right here. Holding out the book, Sarai explained while Noble scanned the pages. The necklace was crafted when Amira awakened. Her flaw is a brutal one, as you already know. But without the necklace, it is even more deadly. Her temper was so wildly unpredictable that she killed 4 servants on her first day of being awakened. Burned them from the inside out just like Lord Gavin. And I thought my flaw was bad. Noble winced. I had the same reaction. My emotions are wild, but I don't roast people whenever I get upset. Sarai shivered. Her powers were no joke, and the thought of killing others unintentionally made her sick to her stomach. Some flaws were truly debilitating. The necklace dampened Amira's uncontrolled fiery outbursts, but didn't stop her from willfully hurting someone like Gavin, who had publicly disgraced her. If not for the jewelry that Amira always wore, the queen would have cooked her entire court. Is that why she kept everyone at arm's length? Noble had assumed the former queen hadn't liked people, which was true, but it might have been more complicated than that. If 1 or 2 of the prominent members of the court were burned publicly, that would drastically cut down on the people willing to come to the palace. So how in the world did that idiot, Lord Alex, manage to survive? Noble resisted the urge to roll her eyes. The man was insufferable, but he had ingratiated himself to the queen. Either his aspect somehow countered her flaw, or he must have done something to earn some amount of Amira's respect. Whatever the reason that he had gained prominence, Noble could guarantee it had nothing to do with his charming personality. Doesn't matter anymore. That man will spend the rest of this nightmare in the special dungeon suite. That alone is generous. The man had tried to derail the coronation. Perhaps he had done it out of loyalty to the former queen, but Noble was pretty sure it was just pettiness. I'm not sad for him. Noble finished reading the page about the necklace and handed the book back to her friend. Does the necklace have any effect on you? Not that I have noticed. But I also haven't been super angry, just nervous and worried. You don't think it will hurt me, do you? Sarai's emotions spiked. It wasn't designed to hurt Amira. You should be fine. Noble turned her attention to the second passage which Sarai had indicated. The volume was the last before Amira's journals took over. Sarai peeked over the edge of the page and explained while Noble read. Unlike this necklace, the bracelets belong to the kings and queens or old. There were 2 sets. Because Amira was not yet married, her father decided to give the second set to his younger child, Bizes, when he stepped down. The late king had been ill for some time and decided to pass on the crown and his other possessions while he was still living. His last act as king had been giving the golden bands to his children. Amira never got married from what I have seen, which is why Lord Bizes still had the bracelets when he went into the mountains. He must have taken his oath to return to Derek seriously, or deep down he knew he would die on his quest. Either way, I guess I should start wearing the second set. Noble had hidden the second set in her room because she was not sure how the temperamental queen would react to Brenna's matching jewelry. Now there was no reason to hide. The bracelets conceal the wearer and hide their power. It seems they were made to protect the ruling monarch from others. While this was not explicitly said in the passage, Sarai had been able to glean the information from other places in the texts. There are a couple of funny stories that the king shares where he passes by but no one senses his presence, so he decides to scare them. Apparently, he caused quite a few ghost stories. Sarai seemed like she knew the man from the way she talked. Of course, she had been reading his most inward thoughts for hours. It made sense that the experience would inspire a sense of closeness to the subject. Ghost stories. I heard rumors of ghosts in the arena below the palace. I wonder if it was Amira trying to keep the palace servants from sneaking down there. Noble smirked. That somehow seemed both exactly and nothing like the former queen. But it was fun to picture her spooking young boys who had come down to blow off some steam with a wrestling match. Their adrenaline would have triggered for quite a different reason than punching their friend's jaw. There's an arena below the castle. Sarai knew that Noble had been training, but Noble realized she had not said where. Yes, we should train there tomorrow. I know you said you aren't as powerful as Amira, but part of me thinks you can acquire some of her skills. I saw her do incredible things. I don't know, Sarai bit her lip. What if we destroy part of the palace with our antics? That's already been done, Noble pointed out with a laugh. And this place is enchanted, so even when we broke through the wall and found that painting, the stone healed itself like nothing ever happened. Sarai gave a determined nod. All right, tomorrow we will train. If I pretend it is for the dreamscape, maybe I'll be able to keep my nerves from taking over. I'll be there to help, don't worry. Noble patted her friend's arm gently. After reading the pages that Sarai had selected, Noble put the book in her hand on the shelf. The others floated back into place to follow the first. Thanks, that was much faster than putting them back one by one, the redhead giggled. You want to keep working? No, I think lunch is in order and I don't want to be late for my meeting with the advisors. This kingdom may be an illusion, but those duties are very real. Noble sighed. Fair enough, Sarai brushed off her hands. She placed one on the wall and repeated the process which she had seen Droon complete. The wall unsealed and allowed the ladies to exit. After you, Your Majesty. Sarai curtsied. Thank you, Your Grace. Noble dipped her head and smiled. They were greeted outside the room by an eager Kosi, who became even more eager at the mention of food. After a brief meal, Noble and the Simkus hurried by her tower suite, startling Pen and Lenore into action. They offered to help the new queen change for the official meeting, but Noble simply added the bracelets to her wrists underneath her attire and rushed out again. Nothing like running late for a meeting you set up. Noble wanted to hit her own forehead as she sped out of the room. Joining the queen on the stairs, Kosi growled softly and gave her a quizzical look. You were right, she smiled at him, slowing her pace. A queen is never late. Everyone else is just early. She couldn't look frazzled entering a room full of powerful people. It would send the wrong message. Straightening her back, Noble finished her walk down the stairs with all the grace of a royal. On the landing, Council was already waiting for her. He had a paper in his hand. Your Majesty, I have been looking everywhere for you, Council bowed as she drew near. I was in the library all morning and had a quick bite to eat, Noble explained, feeling a little bad for making him worry. You were with your aunt the entire time. That is by far the longest you two have been around each other willingly, ever. Counsel's emotions became unstable. Noble tried to comfort him as she spoke. She had a lot to show me in the Royal Library. And still does. Taking over isn't easy. I will need her support. Counsel fell in step beside her as she exited the stairs. As Noble tucked her hair behind her ear, her sleeve slid down her arm. The man's eyes opened wide. What is that? Her Grace is giving you jewelry now. What? Oh. Noble looked at the golden band on her arm. This is not Aunt Amira's. There was a second set. The reigning monarch is supposed to wear them. So I am trying to follow that tradition. A second set. Counsel took a deep breath. Still, you need to be wary of trickery. Those could just as easily be shackles as gifts of goodwill. A bit dramatic. Surely he saw Bizes wear these same bracelets. He just has no way of knowing they are the exact same ones. Noble took a deep breath. I can tell you are concerned, but there is no need. We are all on the same side of wanting to end the tyrant once and for all. She patted his shoulder. You have given up on trying to control it, then. The protector furrowed his brow. I had never seriously considered trying to control it, especially if we are unable to find the heart. Noble had noted the man's suggestion before. While it might have been interesting to explore long-term, it was not a path for ending the nightmare, was it? No, even if we got control, there is always the chance that the creature could turn on us without warning. Not hearing her thought, Counsel tapped his chin. I see. Have you made any progress in finding the heart then? Surely your aunt has given you new information. The hope in the man's voice felt like a knife in Noble's stomach. Amira knows less than we thought, she answered carefully. Counsel grunted. Another one of her tricks. No, she is helping us search for information in the Royal Library. There is just so much of it. And some of the most important books are missing. Noble grimaced as the man's expression darkened. She held up her hand. But they will be found. Maybe you can help us look. I will tell Droon to give you access to every part of the library as well. 3 heads are better than 1. Corrupted creatures sure seem to think so. Counsel nodded seriously. I will ask to see if any of the servants have spotted misplaced books. Though if I am being candid, I suspect your aunt took them. He is not wrong, but at the same time isn't right. What a strange thing. Noble forced a smile. I can promise that my aunt does not know where the missing books are, and she is as dedicated as we are to finding them. The man let the matter rest at last, much to Noble's relief. She changed the topic. Did you just come to get me because I am late for this meeting, or was there something you wanted to tell me? Her eyes darted down to the rolled-up paper in the man's hand. On cue, he lifted it. You asked for a proposal on slavery in the kingdom and I have done just that. I wrote down all my ideas and how we should proceed. It should minimize the impact on the workforce while still providing freedom to those who desperately need it. Counsel puffed out his chest. That is excellent news. I cannot wait to see what you have planned. Noble took the paper and unrolled it, but she barely read the first sentence before they turned the corner. Your Majesty. General Theo bowed as he beckoned them near. Noble released the scroll to let it roll back on itself and sent her companion an apologetic look. I will read it when I have time later. Counsel smiled weakly. I understand. The work of a queen is never done. At least with you here, it won't be boring. Noble coaxed a bigger smile out of the man beside her. That shows how little you know about politics, Your Majesty. I am afraid that you will find this to be a dull affair. But I shall do my best to make things as interesting as possible. You can lean on me. The winsome man dipped his head. Noble hid her grin. She probably knew more about politics than he did, just not royal policy. He was wrong, too. After her fort had found a loophole which allowed them able to adopt reign, Noble had done a study of the law and its intricacies. The reasons laws were made as well as their intended functions and unintended consequences were fascinating. More recently, Noble had worked closely with government officials both to pinpoint the nightmare gates in Antarctica and to organize the evacuation efforts. She was no stranger to how things worked, and when they didn't. However, Noble did not correct Council's thinking. I will lean on your guidance and knowledge to get me through this meeting. Your help is invaluable. She did not say this just to flatter him. If Noble did not wish to spend all her time managing Crestfall, she would need to allow Council and the others to take up as many of the tasks as they were able. Followed by Kosi, the pair met General Theo outside a large open door. Clad in all his military finery, Theo continued to bow until Noble acknowledged him. Good afternoon, General. Is everyone else within? Everyone except Her Grace. Theo lowered his eyes. There is no need to be concerned. My aunt will not be joining us, Noble answered pleasantly. The two ladies had already decided this. Sarai said that she did not want the leaders to defer to her instead of the new queen, but Noble could see that her sweet friend was worried about becoming tongue-tied again. Looking through the journals in the library was far more important to ending the nightmare, so Noble saw no reason to argue with her choice. A smile of relief formed on Theo's face. Oh, then everyone is assembled and waiting for you. Stepping into the doorway, Theo announced the arrival of the new queen. As Noble entered the room, she noted how similar and yet simultaneously different it was from the Chancellor's office in the NQSC. 24 men stood around a large utilitarian table with 3 times that many assistants and servants ready to complete any task given to them. Pages of documents were piled high on the table, looking as official as they did ominous. The men and women all regarded their monarch's entrance with lowered heads. Along with Theo, Noble recognized many of the people at the table, though she could not guess their identities. Thankfully, introductions were the first order of business. Every minister and dignitary told the new monarch their name, position, and responsibilities. Noble tried to commit as many as she could to memory. By the time they were done, the floating queen felt she was drowning in the flood of information. And it was only the beginning. Even from their introductions, Noble could sense which of the lords and ladies were and were not on her side. Some of them were part of the old guard, while others were slightly younger. Amira had not been foolish enough to put any of the sycophantic hopefuls in leadership, but a few of the assistants wore the emblems that Noble had seen at the centennial event. Gauging each member's emotional signature and reaction to her presence, Noble noted who would likely need to be replaced. Alex was a sobering reminder that people would not go along with her just because Amira was suddenly on board with her leadership. But that would be a job for another day. For now, she just needed to keep her head above water and try to get a grasp on how things were run. Fortunately, that proved to be an easier task than the first. Amira had 100 years to streamline the government. As monarch, her rule had been absolute, but each of her advisors had a specific job with limited responsibilities. And for the most part, the people in those roles seemed competent. That's good. Just keep things moving along. City building plans, military routines, and all manner of things were put before Noble for her to approve or reject. The rapid-fire questions were met with measured responses. And there were only a few instances where Noble genuinely had no idea how to proceed. She offered to examine those matters more closely at a later time. Noble selected the royal colors and affirmed Theo as her general. She also named her patron god, which remained the beast god to avoid any backlash. Not that the floating queen had any real preference. They were all dead anyway. Things were running smoothly. Finally, the last person at the table, a middle-aged woman in a flowing blue dress, stood to speak. Advisor Asa, she reminded the new queen. I am the royal secretary. Outside of these meetings, I convey your wishes to whomever you desire. I appreciate that, advisor. Noble nodded from the head of the table. A servant brought the woman a piece of paper and whispered in her ear. Noble raised her eyebrows. Asa thanked the servant and addressed the queen. I have a few requests from the castle steward. Would you like them now or later? Let's get this over with. Now is preferable. Noble smiled. Asa opened the paper and began to list the requests. He asks where Queen Aunt Amira's things should be moved. Did they go to one of the other suites or shall they be packaged to go another location? The room went still. Everyone wanted to know if the new queen would embrace or exile her predecessor. But Noble had a different worry. The missing books were likely in the royal suite. Moving things might cause them to be lost forever. Please tell him not to move anything just yet. I will let my aunt decide what is best for her when she is ready. The queen felt the tension in the room lessen. Asa went on to the next order of business. What about the consort's quarters? Should the steward begin airing it out for a new resident? If the other advisors were uncomfortable before, now they were mortified. Their eyes all flicked to Counsel, who colored under their stares. Counsel banged his fist on the table. How dare you? But Asa smiled sweetly. I am only reading the questions I was given. It was Her Majesty's desire for me to ask publicly. You are trying to insult Her Majesty's honor. Counsel rose and placed his hand on his sword. But Noble reached out to stop him. It was a valid question, and I do think I will make use of the quarters. Tell the steward to open the rooms and make them ready for use. Counsel looked at her, astonished. What are you saying, Your Majesty? What? Do you not think Kosi deserves his own place in the palace? It is his home as well now. Noble nodded seriously. Counsel sat down in his seat with a satisfied grin. Indeed, the Simkus deserves all the honor the kingdom can give for his service. It made sense to let the golden creature have the unused space. The room was close to the royal quarters since it was intended for the monarch's spouse. Perhaps it was even connected directly by one of the many hidden doors. Asa's triumphant smile faded. She ducked her head submissively. I will convey the message, Your Majesty. Your Majesty is both wise and considerate, Theo said. We thank you for giving us your time today. The others around the table nodded or muttered their assent, silencing anything else Asa might have asked. Taking the cue, Noble floated her chair backward, grabbed Counsel's scroll, and dipped her chin. That will be all for today. Please bring any other concerns to Counsel, and he will make sure that I receive them. Sweeping out of the room, Noble waited until she was in the hall to let her face relax. She heaved a great sigh. You will have to relieve the royal secretary. She did that just to embarrass you. Counsel hurried up beside her with Kosi hot on his heels. I know, Noble shut her eyes for a moment. But she wanted to get a reaction out of me, and I would not give her that victory. I have seen her kind before. As soon as you find someone better suited to that post, I will replace her and move Asa to another position. Another position. Counsel furrowed his brow. Keep your friends close and enemies closer. The only reason to pull that stunt was to make herself look like a martyr. Noble wrinkled her nose. Alex is already playing the victim perfectly. You don't need another, the protector understood. So that's why you are being so warm and friendly with your aunt. To keep an eye on her. Not exactly. Noble shook her head. Amira has changed. You'll see it. If you spend enough time with her, you will see she hasn't. The man was sure on this point. I will wait until you see the light. I hope we can agree on this issue soon. Perhaps you will join us for training in the morning. The queen offered. You are even training with her. Well, good then. Find out her weaknesses if she will tell you. It cannot hurt to be prepared for the inevitable. The man touched the hilt of his sword. Always be prepared. I think I have heard that motto. Noble chuckled softly. Was that motto what made you ready for Advisor Asa's question? Counsel scratched his chin. Maybe, Noble grinned. Well, it was quick thinking. My only worry was about the man who has your heart, but I suppose you will be too in love to live in separate suites. Counsel continued to stroke his chin, but his emotions spiked. Noble's did too. A blush crept to her cheeks. That is a reasonable assumption. And now that you are queen, he doesn't have to hide anymore. Counsel's eyes slowly slid her way. When will I have the pleasure of meeting him? Noble blinked a few times and brought her hand to her head. The scroll in her hand dropped to the floor. Counsel scooped it up with a worried look. Are you all right? Was it something I said? Just a little overwhelmed, Noble hedged. I will be fine. Noble glanced at the rolled-up page. She gasped dramatically. Oh, your proposal. How could I have forgotten about it? We should look at it right now. Yes, we should. That is the only thing I want to talk about for the next hour, don't you? Good. Let's go. After consulting a servant, Noble was directed to an office maintained by former Queen Amira. As Noble expected, it was well kept and neatly organized. Something the professor had noticed about the former monarch was how meticulously clean she wanted everything to be. There were shelves of clearly labeled books ranging from law to the Queen's own bookkeeping notes. That woman must spend all her time writing. There were unfinished papers on an ornate table, but even they were piled in tidy stacks awaiting a monarch's attention. Noble gingerly pushed them aside and made a place for Council's proposal. Spreading out the page, she studied each and every word carefully to make sure she had gained its full meaning. Of course, she wasn't doing it to keep Council from bringing up the matter of who Noble was in love with. Surely he had forgotten all about that by now. No, she was being a good leader and giving the document her full attention. Kosi had disappeared as soon as they arrived, probably to chase a palace pest or go relieve himself. Council and Noble were completely alone. It's not a problem, Noble told herself. It just means I can be more candid with my feedback on his proposal. And what a proposal it was. The first part was straightforward enough. It freed those in slavery from their masters and granted them the same rights as other citizens. Something that should have been done long ago. Noble mused. Her mentality was different than those in the dream realm. Even in the waking world, slavery was part of nearly every culture in the ancient past. It was only through years of struggle by good people and eventually the decimation of most of humanity by war and other catastrophes that the practice was finally fully abolished back home. Here, most people who weren't affected directly by it probably never gave the institution a second thought. It was just the way things were. While the first part of the document was something that Noble could understand and support, the more she read, the more concerned she became. What do you mean by this? The woman asked at last. She held out the paper for him to peruse. Council squinted. What are you confused by? It reads like you want every person who has ever owned a slave to either be put to death or enslaved themselves. Noble blinked at the page. Oh, that. The man shrugged. I figured it was only fair to give them the choice. Between servitude and death, not much of a choice. The new queen's mouth hung open. It is still more choice than they give those in their supposed care. I thought that was being generous. The man furrowed his brow. I assumed you wanted to get rid of slavery, not change one form for another. This law would have included my parents, who freed you. Noble rubbed her forehead. At least some of the palace staff were if not slaves, then at least indentured servants. Would Council force Noble from the throne right after she claimed it? You could make case-by-case exceptions, Your Majesty. Council started. I don't think you know what you are asking. You are trading one wrong for another. Noble felt a wave of anger from the man before her. You have no idea what it is like to be a slave. My first master was a difficult man, making me stand completely still to hold books for hours on end while he practiced his sorcery. I just thought he was lonely, and maybe he was, but you don't treat those you care about like pieces of furniture. After he died, things only got worse. I suffered every manner of abuse at the hands of those who had power. It wasn't until I ended up in your parents' household that I found any relief. Yes, they set me free and treated me like a human, but they were an exception, not the rule. Even then, I was never considered their equal. How could I be with my background? Council's face darkened. Leaning across the table, Noble placed her hand on the man's arm. You should never have had to go through all of that. No one should. That is why we must punish those who are responsible. Council pressed. But this. No. Noble took a deep breath. We need to focus on bettering the lives of those freed first and foremost. The man blew out his cheeks. Your Majesty, if you would hear me out. The only way I see to get justice is to reverse the roles. Then you need new eyes, Council. Noble handed him the paper and held up her hand. Rewrite this. Maybe try some restitution for survivors of slavery either from their masters or the royal treasury. We have at least some we can spare. I know which advisor would have numbers on both the amount of money we can spend on this project and the number of people affected. Tapping her fingers, Noble's mind raced. She hadn't exactly wanted to broach this topic, but now that she had, there was no stopping her mind from fixing the problem. Real or not, these people's plight was now her problem. We will start by freeing those in the palace and offering them compensation. If they want to stay on staff, then they will be paid for their work from now on. Noble would have loved to make a more sweeping edict, but first, she needed to lead by example. Council looked down at the paper, trying to decide if arguing with the queen would make any difference. The anger in his soul over years of terrible treatment was not something he would be able to release in these few minutes. He felt something cool and calming press against his consciousness. Council sighed. I will make another draft. Thank you. I look forward to reading it. Noble smiled brightly. There was a loud scratch at the door and a whimper. You better let Kosi in before the door splinters. The queen chuckled lightly. Nodding, Council let in the Simkus, who was still chewing some vermin in his mouth. Hopefully, it wasn't human. Since Kosi is here, I will take my leave to carry out the duties which you have assigned. That is, unless you have anything else you need from me, Your Majesty. The man's formal tone was not lost on Noble. She decided to let him have some time to reflect. If you wouldn't mind sending a servant so I can draw up the plan for the palace staff, I would appreciate it. And if you see General Theo, send him my way as well. Council bowed and exited. Noble relaxed for a moment. Well, that could have gone better. Kosi gave her a quizzical look as he swallowed. I'll fill you in later. The queen was surprised by the quick knock at the door. Had Council forgotten something? No, it was General Theo. You wanted to see me, Your Majesty. The soldier lowered his head. Come in. Noble beckoned him forward. I require your military prowess in accomplishing a top priority in the kingdom. I will do whatever I can. Theo's hand instinctively went to his sword. What do you need? Pulling a paper from one of the neat piles, Noble pointed to the mountains and drew a line to Crestfall. A sad smile formed on her face. What do I need? Nothing much. Just a plan to take down a tyrant. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. The next couple of weeks went by in a blur. At some moments, Noble felt like time had all but stopped, while at other points it felt like a lifetime had been packed in a single second. Her days were divided between Crestfall's royal business, scouring the library to find evidence of the heart, and training with Sarai. The first took up far more of Noble's time than she would have liked. Just now, Noble exited from yet another tedious but necessary conference with her advisors. Even as a queen, much of her day was paperwork and administration. The storybooks made it seem like a glamorous job, but to do it well required a vast amount of patience and a steep learning curve. Each morning there was some meeting or other that required her attention. This one had to do mostly with the proper water distribution among the city quadrants. Since Noble knew so little about the topic, she was little help on how much more farmers should get than the other sectors. Noble allowed her advisors to figure it out amongst themselves. Before she left, the new royal secretary assured his queen that he would gather any other necessary information and have it for her to examine by the end of the day. He is a vast improvement over Asa. Taking a deep breath, Noble hurried into the hall with Kosi following dutifully behind. Though Noble hadn't needed an excuse to leave, she had used the Simkus's whimper as a signal that he was done being cooped up. So was she. We will pass by the garden for a moment so we can both get some fresh air. Noble patted Kosi's golden mane. It had regrown nicely and was softer than ever. He purred softly under her caress. I like you too, big guy. Let's go. The queen had places to be, but her sanity was worth a few moments of silence. Her days were very packed. She couldn't afford to relax more than a moment or two. The time for the next attack from the mountains was looming near. While the exact day and hour were unknown, the people of the city began to grow restless. On one hand, the citizens looked forward to the attack because their meat supply was running low. But on the other hand, the attacks meant loss of life and violence outside the city walls. There was always the lingering fear that something might get through the barrier. It was a justified fear, though Noble would never admit that as queen. She had seen the weak spot in the runes. The ring was not impervious to attack. It could take another 100 years to break. Or it could stop working tomorrow. That was why Noble had ordered council to find an awakened who might be able to repair the damage. A mason was found, but his flaw made him move at a snail's pace. She only hoped he would be successful before the appointed time. At least Theo has men guarding the break at all times. General Theo had done all that Noble asked and more. She had wanted him to work with her to form a coordinated plan for using Crestfall's army, but Theo had gone a step further and reformed the ranks of the soldiers to meet their objective. Now each company of men had a specialty which could be mobilized when the need arose. Amira hadn't chosen her new general on a whim. Theo was both competent and capable of leadership. Heading into the garden courtyard, Noble felt the sun caress her skin. She breathed the fresh air. It was so different than the filtered air of the NQSC. It was refreshing, invigorating even. Kosi seemed to think so too. He ran about the plants like a kitten chasing a butterfly. At that moment, it was hard to imagine that she was in a nightmare. This is nice. I wish it could always be like this. Ah, Noble, I had no idea you cared so much, came the sarcastic response in her head. A moment later Noble felt Nickel's presence come within range of the wall. While I'm very fond of you, I was speaking of the weather, garden, and Kosi. Noble rolled her eyes. Sure you were. Nick appeared at the top of the wall. In his black cape, he looked like a wraith against the muted colors filtering through the invisible barrier. I doubt you came just to try and look cool. What do you have to report? Crouching, Nick disappeared from view just as the patrol passed. His silent words continued to stream through the other's voice. Don't tell Sarai, but I foiled yet another assassination attempt against Amira before it happened. Noble frowned. Another one. That is the fourth one in 2 weeks. Surely that cannot be normal. There is a very dedicated contingency that is committed to killing the former queen. I have been able to blend in with their lower ranks, but no one will tell me who their leader is. If I find out, I'll take care of them and the whole organization should crumble. Noble knew better than to ask what he meant and simply nodded. Sarai would be protected at all costs. Tell Fireshing to remain aware of her surroundings. I know she spends her days in that protected library, but even that won't stop a real lunatic. I'll let her know, but she can take care of herself. Noble lifted her face to the sky, soaking in the sun's rays. How are the citizens of Crestfall? Your opening of the royal kitchen to not waste food has made you even more popular. You know you are an actual queen, not a pageant queen, right? Nickel scoffed. Beauty pageants had not happened in either Awaken's lifetime, but that didn't stop webtoons from forcing their male heroes to disguise themselves and compete in them to save the day. There are some similarities. I have to dress up in pretty gowns and say all the right things. And the competition to get this spot was rather heated. Noble smirked. Ignoring her pun, Nickel went on. Well, the city already looks like a different place than when I came. The woman's smile faded. Different better or different worse? I suppose if I had to pick one, it would be better. Amira seemed to have lost touch with the people. Your recent changes to improve their quality of life are annoyingly good. Noble leaned against the wall or the courtyard. I'll take the compliment. Is there anything else? Just that the farmers think their crops will fail if they don't get more water. Already on it. Noble crossed her arms in satisfaction. Nickel was an invaluable wealth of information, but Noble liked it when she was occasionally a step ahead of his intel. Nick grunted. Then I'll be off. If anything noteworthy happens, I'll come back within range to contact you. I'll leave you to deal with your lapdog instead. Noble furrowed her brow. Kosi is far from a lapdog. I am glad he didn't hear you say that. You'd hurt his feelings. As much as I would love to make a transcendent demon angry, I wasn't talking about Kosi. I was talking about him. Your Majesty. Noble had sensed the protector coming through his emotions, but Nickel must have seen him from the top of the wall. Nick had called him a lapdog. How rude. Noble would have chastised him, but the mysterious wraith was already out of range of her emotional radar and wouldn't hear her anyway. Counsel, Noble welcomed the handsome man. I missed you this morning. The man flourished an elaborate bow while holding a small container in one hand. I have been busy working. Thankfully I at last have something to show for it. Noble raised her eyebrows. Oh, I hope it is not another proposal on stricter punishments for former slave owners. I know things aren't moving as swiftly, or violently, as you want, but... She stopped when she saw Counsel's excited expression darken. It isn't that this time. Noble bit her lip. To her credit, he had been pushing for the death of a lot of people lately. Probably people who deserved it, but Noble had been unwilling to pull that trigger without the due process of law. I spoke rashly, forgive me. What is it that had you running through the garden like a wanted man? While Counsel did not like the analogy, he could not deny his eagerness must have looked strange. He held up the vial in his hand. This. Noble smiled weakly. And, this, is. You have been looking for a weapon to use against the tyrant. This will help. Counsel beamed. That is wonderful, but it doesn't exactly answer my question. The queen's smile faltered. But her protector remained unfazed. You know that I found my first master's sorcery books among the archives in the library. It was true. Almost as soon as Noble had permitted Droon to let Counsel have access to the entirety of the palace's resources, the head librarian suddenly remembered about the existence of the ancient books. Counsel had gladly accepted the reading material. It seemed he was putting it to good use. But doing what? Was the vial with the books? Noble tried to make sense of what she was seeing. Counsel coughed lightly. No. But the liquid inside is based loosely on something I found in one of the books. You see, my master was a man with many talents. In addition to sorcery, he was a renowned healer. But with that knowledge came its dark counterpart. Noble clenched her jaw. The opposite of healing is hurting, poison. That is correct. Counsel was excited that the queen finally seemed to be on the same page. I took what he wrote and modified it. Look what I created. Waving the vial in the air, Counsel looked like a proud father showing off his firstborn child. At last, the pieces fell into place in Noble's mind. You made a poison for the tyrant. Yes. Counsel held out the container for Noble to view, but she simply stared. Is he being serious? I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but isn't poisoning the Lord of the Mountain basically impossible? You said that Kosi couldn't be poisoned and the tyrant would be even more powerful. That was before I found out I could do this. Uncorking the bottle, Counsel allowed a single drop to fall on the ground. Step back. He added belatedly, though the words were not necessary. Noble was already getting as far away as she could from the vile liquid. The drop hit the earth and immediately the verdant grass withered. But that was not all. The ground at the spot began to be eaten away as if devoured by some invisible monster. The hole that formed grew wider and wider. Noble lifted her body higher off of the ground as she continued to move away. She could fly over the hole, but what about Kosi? The Simkus retreated to the far corner of the garden. If needed, he would jump over the wall and continue to flee. The demon could face off against all manner of monsters, but a growing hole in the ground was not something he could battle. And the hole continued to envelop more ground every second. Make it stop, Noble cried. At this rate, it would devour the whole city. But just as her words came out, an earthquake rattled the ground. The hole stopped growing with a sizzling sound like human whispers. Half of the garden courtyard was in disarray, a large crater present where beautiful flowers had once been. Thankfully it hadn't eaten through to the caverns that Noble assumed were below. Then the hole would have been impossible to fill. Moving around the edge of the crater, Noble scowled at her subordinate. Have you lost your mind? Counsel furrowed his brow. It is just a garden. It can be fixed. You have an awakened gardener on the palace staff now. You think this is about some flowers? You caused an earthquake. Noble screamed. The man wondered if having a temper was mandatory for being queen. He took a deep breath. That was an unfortunate side effect. But I think you are missing the bigger point. If one drop can do all this, then a few would eat out Kosi's insides like it was slicing through butter. The whole vial. I think not even the tyrant would be immune. What is keeping it from eating through that glass in your hand? Noble pictured Council's fingers melting away like the ground. She shivered. Don't worry. Due to the nature of the poison, glass is immune to the effects. Noble had many questions on how exactly that worked, but she did not have the depth of knowledge on magical poisons to ask them with any intelligence. Anyway, there was a more pressing concern. So it is glass then. What if it breaks? Noble felt the man's emotions spike. That would be unfortunate. He admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. I will take good care of it. You had better. What kind of person makes a weapon like that without at least consulting someone else? Council has lost his mind. What if it were to fall into the wrong hands? Taking a deep breath, Noble tried to look at the positive. If they finally had a weapon that could weaken or even kill the tyrant, that was good, right? Impressive work. I did not know such a thing was even possible. Council smiled, happy to see that the monarch was finally coming around. More things are possible than the human mind can comprehend, Your Majesty. We simply need the right key to unlock the door. Pressing her lips together, Noble shook her head. I have more than my fair share of experience with keys. They don't always unlock the door that you think they will. She sighed. Hopefully this one works exactly as intended. The Lord of the Mountain was powerful, but every source of power had its natural limit. With any luck, this would be beyond what the tyrant's tolerance. There was one issue though. Noble furrowed her brow. How do you plan to get the poison to the Lord of the Mountains? Council looked surprised by the question. Don't you see, Your Majesty? I won't. You will. Me. Noble looked at him for a moment in confusion. Then it dawned on her. Something like this hadn't been tried even when Council's first master had been alive. That was because Noble had a quality that all of her predecessors lacked. She could fly. You want me to take to the sky and find a way to get this into the tyrant's mouth? Council winced. That was my idea, yes. But when you say it like that it sounds a bit like suicide. Noble thought of the creature's toothy mouth which was protected by the long ominous trunk full of lightning. No, it's a good idea. As long as you and my aunt can keep him distracted, I should be able to get close enough. Noble glanced at the marred ground. She could almost swear she heard it crying out to her in pain. Even if the poison doesn't kill the Lord, it should weaken it enough to give us an opening. What was that? Council tucked away the vial into his clothes. At the same moment, Kosi growled softly, pawing nervously at the earth. What? Noble glanced between the two nervous faces. After another moment of tense silence, Council relaxed. The ground shifted. It was probably just a leftover tremor that rattled down from the mountains. That happens from time to time. You didn't feel it. Noble realized that she was still lifted higher from the earth than normal. She raised dramatically and then lowered to her normal hovering position. Oh, no I didn't. I have been off the ground since you put a hole in it. And that tremor is more likely due to the soil shifting into the open space. We must get this hole filled at once. Noble called for a servant to get the gardener. After the young man got over the shock of seeing the decimated courtyard, he fled to find the awakened in question. Well, now that your demonstration is done, I suppose it is time we flee the scene of the crime. The queen glanced over her shoulder and motioned for Kosi to follow. Rather than walk around, the Simkus leapt over the chasm to join the two humans. This time Noble could hear the shifting earth. You better not have messed up the castle's foundation. She shot the man beside her a withering look. I was careful, the man defended himself, but perhaps in the future, I will leave the drama to the court musicians. That's a better plan. The queen agreed easily. She pursed her lips for a moment. Was that magical concoction difficult to make? Hard. It was nearly impossible. I only had one of the ingredients by happenstance and another is all but extinct. This little beauty is one of a kind. Council patted the vial gently. The queen was both relieved that the product could not be mass-produced and worried about the very limited quantity. I see. Then that is all the more reason not to waste another drop. We will need all of it if we hope to affect the ancient lord. Understood. I swear I will not let another drip leave the vial until our appointment with the tyrant. Council was firm in this belief. Noble nodded. Very good. Entering the palace, Council was confused when Noble turned away from the direction of the throne room. Are you not heading to your room or office? I am grabbing a quick bite to eat and then heading to the underground arena. Noble sniffed at the air to find her way toward the kitchen. The underground arena. Are you training with Queen Aunt Amira again? Noble didn't need to experience Council's emotions to know he was feeling jealous. It was written all over his face. Don't act so surprised. I have been doing it every day for weeks now. I would still love for you to join us. We all need to be in peak physical condition for what is coming. Pressing his lips together, Council grunted. You know how the former queen gets around me. She has so much animosity toward me, and you always get the brunt of that anger. Usually with fire. That may have been true in the past, but things are different now. Spend more than a few minutes around Her Grace and you will see it is like talking to a whole other person. I don't know, the man hesitated. Come on. We will see if the kitchen has your favorite cakes on hand and then walk down together. What do you say? Noble held her breath. Of course, she could order Council to attend her at all times and follow her every whim, but then she would be no better than those who had enslaved him for years. It was much better for him to come along of his own volition. Very well, Council smiled. I will go, but if Her Grace makes even a single snide remark. She won't. Noble didn't want him to make an idle threat. Or any kind of threat at all. It was one thing to make a statement against Amira, but now Council was speaking against her best friend, Sarai. And Noble was a bit protective of those she cared about. After gathering the necessary foodstuffs, the group had a walking meal on their way as they traveled underground. Noble was used to snacking while she traveled across the campus of the academy or in transit between home and work. If Council thought this method of eating on the go was strange, he didn't say so. Soon they were in the arena. Only, the room was empty. There was extra dirt on the ground from the last time Noble was there, but otherwise, the arena of the ancient kings seemed untouched. Aunt, Noble called tentatively. There were a few dark corners, like the one the original Amira had hidden in to watch her conduct sorcery, and Noble hoped Sarai was simply out of view. The bracelets hid Noble from being able to sense her friend's emotions instinctively, but after a quick sweep, Noble was pretty sure the underground cavern was empty. Sarai. Noble tried not to panic. If only she had a third piece to the other's voice, then she would be able to pinpoint her friend without a problem. Had something happened, maybe Nickel hadn't caught every assassination attempt, and Sarai was hurt somewhere. I won't forgive myself if something happened to her. It's my fault that she is here. Noble's eyes continued to desperately search the empty room when a voice behind her interrupted the spiraling thoughts. I am here. Hurrying forward, Noble ushered Council and Kosi into the chamber to make room for the woman behind them. I was worried. Noble wrapped her arms around Sarai's neck. I decided when the ground shook that it was probably better not to be under tons of palace rock and stone. The redhead explained. Noble's eyes opened wider. You felt the shaking too. Of course I did. There were a few tremors. Sarai nodded. I am glad you weren't hurt. Noble released her friend and shot a judgmental look toward Council, who averted his eyes toward the ceiling. The man had been so reckless. Hopefully, he had learned his lesson. I am fine, but do you think it is a good idea to be down here with seismic activity going on? Sarai glanced anxiously at all of the fallen dust. Noble noticed there were still some particles on the emerald dress. How frightened Sarai must have been. It was a fluke. I don't think we have to worry about it anymore. Noble spared Council the awkward explanation. She would tell Sarai what happened later when they were alone. That is good to know. Sarai trusted her friend. It is good to see you, Council. And of course, Kosi. Your Grace. Council's mouth dropped open slightly. The redhead's voice was so affectionate when she called the Simpus's name. Normally, Amira ignored or chastised the creature, yet here she was patting his golden fur. Yes. Sarai looked at him curiously. The man realized his greeting had come out like a question. He bowed. Nothing. Forget I am here. The ladies exchanged glances as both males moved toward the heavy stone bench. Council sat down, eager to be below the notice of the others in the room. Sarai decided to grant his wish. She smiled at Noble. Shall we begin? Noble and Sarai faced off against one another in the middle of the ring, a slight smirk on each of their faces. This was easily Noble's favorite part of the day. While having counsel there meant they couldn't carry on their normal routine, it did not mean they couldn't have a bit of fun and friendly competition. The two ladies stretched for a moment, Fanfiction with her aching ember, and QueenBee with the ever-faithful, unlikely end. Counsel watched, wondering how the two women could be so relaxed while holding weapons within arm's reach of one another. Then, on some silent, unspoken cue, the duelist stopped stretching and burst into action. What looked to an onlooker like a chaotic flurry of motion was actually a coordinated set of moves and countermoves that were simply the opening for a more measured battle. It was as beautiful as it was frightening. Is this what they have been doing down here? He asked the Simkus. Kosi lifted his head, sniffed at the air, and lowered it again. He let out a few low grunts. I see, Counsel pursed his lips. As Bee flew over her opponent's head, a fireball narrowly missed her, nipping at the plume of her helmet instead. Counsel noticed how she always had a new feather in place whenever they started. It was a curious thing. The more the fighting went on, the more Counsel felt there was something deeply wrong with what he saw. The women bantered as they moved about the floor, each taking the opportunity to point out when the other did well or faltered. What's more, when the former queen received a hit, the temperature in the room remained the same. It had not fluctuated once since he arrived. Counsel had become so used to suffering Amira's heat that the absence of it was somehow more concerning. What was positively eerie though was the expression on the former queen's face. The woman in green seemed to be having fun. No, that couldn't be. Counsel wasn't even sure Amira could have positive emotions, let alone express them. When Bee finally got past the spear and held the estoc to Fanfiction's neck, the man watching leapt to his feet. What is the meaning of this? Startled, Noble nearly nicked Sarai with her sword. She lowered it quickly and turned to Counsel. What is the meaning of what? Sarai was equally confused, but she met his outburst with reserved silence. Counsel remained quiet for a long time, turning over what he had seen in his mind. Would you battle me, Your Grace? The man's question was polite, but his tone was dubious. I am not sure that is a good idea. Noble stepped between the two. Am I below Her Grace answering me herself? Counsel locked eyes with the red-haired woman. Sarai regarded him for a moment. I see no issue with a friendly sparring match. Noble tensed. The match was likely to be anything but friendly. Counsel and the real Amira had a long history of loathing between them. While the Protector was reluctant to hurt Noble, he was unlikely to have the same reservations toward the deposed queen. But Sarai had already accepted. The most Noble could do would be to limit the damage that could be done. She sighed. Give me the vial. The floating queen held out her hand. The last thing you need is it breaking and setting off a new round of chaos. Flushing, Counsel pulled the small bottle and handed it over to the monarch. She gripped it gingerly in front of her. Both of you, play nice. If I see any hint of impropriety, that person will forfeit. After one last meaningful look at each of them, Noble moved to join Kosi. The Simkus snorted. Do you see any way that this is going to end well? She asked the golden creature. He stared at her and seemed to shrug. Me either. Noble sighed and furrowed her brow. She had plenty to be concerned about. Her protector was becoming more brazen in his behavior. Among other things, since she had been crowned, Counsel had tried to pass a law to enslave or kill an entire group of people, made a deadly weapon, and used the garden to try it out, and now he was taking a run at the former queen. Had he lost his mind? Or was he trying to find the limits of his new position? What even was his position as counsel to the queen? That is something I need to figure out. Or at least something we should discuss. At least his final questionable decision wouldn't end in half of the beautiful garden being consumed by poison. Sarai was more than capable of holding her own in a match. The floating queen hovered over the solid stone bench to watch. Things were about to get very interesting. A smile came to Noble's face as she watched the regal redhead take her place. Even in Amira's body and clothes, Fanfiction's stance was unmistakable. Her grace and bearing transcended any body that the spell could put her in. You've got this. Sarai's sorcery aspect gave her an edge, but Counsel could not be underestimated. Noble had seen him on the battlefield. His ability to take down something the size of a hill was impressive in its own right. Holding out her spear, Fireshing indicated she was ready. Counsel tilted his head to one side, then nodded out of courtesy. The match began. Unlike the previous round, which had started fast and furious, this duel began slow-paced. The two combatants felt each other out, tentatively making advances and then retreating to avoid direct hits. Then all at once, everything shifted. Counsel rushed forward, his sword pointed ready to run Fireshing through at her abdomen. At the last moment, he lifted his blade, aiming for her heart instead. It would have been a devastating hit, if it had landed. But Fire was far too experienced for such a ploy to work. She stepped aside easily and sent a ball of flames to deter him from making a follow-up strike. Counsel grunted. He whirled around as soon as the heat dissipated and brandished his blade. The aching ember was more agile than it looked even at close range, and the tip deflected his sword with each turn. The head of the spear began to glow and Counsel opened his eyes wide. He gasped as the metal burst into flames. "I'd back up if I were you," Fireshing winked playfully. Grunting, the man retreated to dodge the first smoldering ball. His expression hardened. Sheathing his sword, he held up his hands. But they weren't raised in surrender. It looked as if Counsel might strangle the former queen from afar. When the next flaming orb went soaring toward him, he was already whispering. Around him, the wind whipped up into a whirling cyclone. It threatened to snuff out the flame as it came toward the warrior, but at the last possible moment, the wind shifted. The ember was brought around Counsel's back and then flew toward the female duelist. It reignited in its full immolating glory. It slammed into the Emerald Royal, engulfing her in flames. Fire! Noble rose from her seat. The redhead burned for a moment longer before shaking off the flames. But Counsel was already on the move. Before the redhead had recovered from the shock of being slammed with her own aspect, the man rushed forward and hit her dominant hand with the broad side of his blade. Sarai reflexively released her spear with a gasp. Counsel eagerly scooped up the weapon and held it triumphantly in the air. Sheathing his sword, he gripped the ember's shaft with both hands. Cracks formed on the polished wood. "I yield." Sarai held up her hands. "Only please don't break the spear." The man tossed the weapon back to the former queen. "It's just as I thought," he scoffed. "I know exactly what is going on here. You're a fraud." Sarai paled. "What do you mean?" Counsel raised both eyebrows at her question. "You heard me. Unless you are pretending to be hard of hearing as well." Noble rushed across the floor and inserted herself between them. She leveled Counsel with a withering gaze. "You cannot speak to my aunt that way. She was kind enough to grant you a sparring match and you ridicule her ingratitude. Why are you upset about winning a sparring match with her grace?" Counsel threw an accusing finger at his opponent. "That is just it. She let me win. I saw what she did in your battle in the throne room. This was nothing like that. She didn't even use her primary weapon, just some second-rate spear which can channel a pale form of her fire." "Hey!" The color returned to Sarai's face. He could insult her all day long, but the second he said anything against her beloved weapon, she was ready to go to war. Standing her ground, Noble held out her arms to keep both parties separated. What happened in the throne room was a mistake. And beyond that, it was a battle to the death, not a spar. You cannot expect the two to be the same. You won. Enjoy it. The man's finger and countenance fell. "So that is how it is. Her Grace wants to make a fool of me, and you defend her yet again. No one thinks you are a fool." Noble tried. But her words fell on deaf ears. If Her Grace were truly trying, she would never have sent such a small ball of fire directly at me. She has seen me redirect them too many times. Am I a mouse and you a cat? Will you not even leave me some self-respect? It seems not. Sarai pressed her lips together. "Counsel, I yielded because I wanted to save my second-rate spear, not to let you earn a hollow victory. I know you may not believe me, but you are right. I do not believe you." The man turned toward Noble and gave a stilted bow. "I will excuse myself, Your Majesty." Noble handed him the vial in her hand. Please reconsider. We would love to continue to have your company. Wouldn't we? Sarai's emotions were all over the place. The man had been rude to her twice, and she did not seem keen on having it happen a third time. It was understandable. Why am I trying so hard to make them like each other? Noble felt her head ache. Why was this so complicated? Sometimes she felt like she was losing herself. Counsel had been so instrumental in helping her when she arrived in the nightmare that it was hard to remember he wasn't real. The bond that Brenna had made tied them together by law, and Noble was beginning to feel her emotions were deeply affected by Counsel's mood. But Counsel was an asset. His cooperation was vital in her current plans to tackle the nightmare. They just needed to push through until the end. Noble briefly considered telling him that he was right. Sarai was a fraud, and she had replaced the queen. But that would raise many questions, some that Noble wasn't sure she could answer. As much as it pained her, perhaps it was better to just keep the two separated for now. Counsel spoke before she could. If it pleases your majesty, I will return when I can better hold my tongue. I do not want to offend you further. He shot the red-haired royal a haughty look, then headed up the stairs two at a time. The women watched him go. Sarai sniffed angrily. How dare he insult my baby? He just doesn't know how amazing you are. She stroked the spear lovingly. I am sorry he acted that way. Noble continued to look at the stairs with a contemplative expression. Is he always so outspoken? The fiery-haired duelist pursed her lips. Deep down I want to like him, but those kind of remarks make it very hard. He is normally very charming. I think he was trying to lure you into losing your temper. Amira did and said a lot of things to him. After all of this time spent avoiding you, I had thought he would be more cautious. I was wrong. Well, despite his outburst, he is right about one thing. I did let him win. Sarai tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and looked away. I might be weaker than the former queen, but now that I know that little trick of his, I can think of a half-dozen ways to counter it. Noble couldn't help but smirk. Amira called sorcery a trick also. Perhaps it is because you both share a sorcery aspect that the sorcery of names seems unimpressive. Sarai shrugged. When he can make the world burn without a word, then maybe I will change my thinking. Looking up the stairs, she sighed. I do feel a little bad about angering Counsel. I should apologize. I do want him to like me. Should we go after him? It may be best if you continue only minimal interaction. Give Counsel space and time. He said he would come back, and he meant it. He is jealous of how much time I am spending with you, so he is sure to crash the party again as soon as he is calm enough. Noble was sure on this point. Are we having a party? Sarai spun her spear and grinned. Yes, the new queen nodded seriously. And this party is about to get hot. The redhead groaned. This again. We have tried for days. I cannot emulate Amira's type of flame. I didn't even see it to know what it looks like or how it was formed. As I said, it was like lava. And although I think you can do it, that is not the most important thing right now. Noble gave her friend a meaningful look. The column. Sarai raised one eyebrow. Yes, the column, Noble confirmed. I really think you can do it. But you said Counsel was guiding it with his wind. The younger woman argued. But Amira acted like she didn't need him at all. I think he only amplified what she was already doing. Having run the memory over in her mind, Noble was certain that Amira could have completed some form of the action on her own. And if the former queen could do it, certainly Sarai could as well. Just give it another try. Noble clasped her hands and pushed out her lip. All right, no need to give me puppy dog eyes. You know I'll do it. Sarai clicked her tongue. Noble beamed. You're the best, you know that. If only your protector friend knew that. The redhead shrugged. Kosi raised his head and snorted. Not you, sweetheart, Sarai said with a dip of her head. I meant the one with a cloud perpetually over his head when he is around me. Satisfied, the Simkus lowered his chin onto his paws. Enough stalling. Noble tapped the tip of the estoc on the ground twice. Let's go. But what if it works and I accidentally melt the wall? The other woman hesitated a moment longer. If it hasn't happened yet, it won't. And even if it does, then you'll get to see the cave drawings before the wall heals itself. Noble rolled her eyes. She had told both Nickel and Sarai about the drawings and even recreated them to the best of her memory. But like the runes of the library, the other two had nothing in particular they could do with the information. And Noble didn't dare try to take them inside. Sure, the portcullis key had helped her escape before, but she wasn't sure how the magical wall would react to 2 or even 3 passengers. Nickel had tried to use the key without her in order to enter, but the man did not seem to know fear. He frustratedly decided that he didn't want to go in there anyway. Just don't tell Nick if you get a peek at the mural. He'll take it personally. Noble winked. Now stop stalling. Fine. Blowing out her cheeks, Sarai dismissed her spear. Raising her arms, she took a deep breath. And let her fire fly. 20 attempts later and nothing like a controllable column of fire came into being. Sarai flooded her essence into each trial, mixing and matching techniques to see if an effective method could be found. Try doing that whirlwind thing and then compressing it, Noble suggested. The woman clad in green obliged. A hurricane of fire spun around Sarai, much like the one that had protected the pair when Noble first discovered her strange second sight. The whirlwind was incredibly hot and deadly. Noble touched her armor to make sure the fire insurance was tucked within. She took a deep breath and held it, hoping to keep the heat from entering her lungs. In the middle of the circle of flames, Sarai was sweating, but it was not from the flames. The fiery woman was pouring her essence and concentration into closing the hole around her. Her heart beat wildly in her ears, but she ignored the pressure as she pushed herself to the limit. The swirling inferno tightened, constrained by some invisible force. Slowly, the flames snaked toward their maker, eventually nipping at the hem of her dress. Closer, closer. Noble continued to hold her breath. Fortunately, awakened could do that longer than mundane humans. A normal person would have passed out by now, but the floating woman didn't even think twice about the fact she wasn't breathing. All she cared about was the fire in the center of the room. The cyclone of heat continued to narrow, brushing up against Sarai's delicate skin as she balled her fists. The bracelets on her hands glowed with an incandescent light. While they masked the true power of the one wearing them, they did not dampen it. That was the job of Amira's necklace, at least when it came to her flaw. While it didn't seem to affect Sarai in the same way, the small chain had still been left behind today. Almost there. Noble gasped. The sweltering heat entered her lungs, but she did not care. The center of the swirling tornado was gone. Fireshing was surrounded by flames as they whipped at her dress, yet the woman was not consumed. She lived among the fire but remained separate from it. She looked like a goddess about to render judgment. You can do it. Noble silently willed it to be true. She dared not utter a sound to break the other woman's concentration. Suddenly, the fire tightened into a single beam aiming at the sky. Yes, the victory was short-lived. No sooner had the flames taken on some semblance of Amira's pillar of fire than they sputtered and wavered out of existence. Sarai dropped to the ground, panting. Using her ability, Noble helped her friend sit up while she hurried to her side. Are you all right? Noble pulled a cloth from inside her armor to dab at the other woman's brow. It came back soaked, and still liquid streamed down Sarai's face. But Sarai stopped her from making another swipe. Give me a moment and I'll be fine. The water dissipated, as Sarai seemed to absorb it back into her skin. Noble frowned. I didn't know you could do that. The other woman nodded slowly. I can, but I do not usually need to. I mostly only produce fire from my hands, so the rest of my body is only loosely exposed to my flames. It made its own barrier of protection. I see. The queen nodded. I had no idea. Sarai might be immune to her own flames, but the nature of that immunity was in the form of her body sweating to keep it cool. It's fine, and I am fine. My body can reabsorb it, so there really is no harm. How did I do? Sarai's questioning glance brought Noble back from her thoughts. You didn't see. Her mouth hung open. I was in it, so it was a little hard to tell exactly what happened. The redhead flushed. Was it that bad? Bad. No. It was amazing. You had it for a split second. It took everything in me not to cry out in victory. Noble's triumphant smile faded. But then you fell. I should not have pushed you so hard. You did nothing wrong. I pushed myself. And if I got closer, the effort wasn't in vain. I will try again. Sarai stood and then stepped to one side. Her gaze was not as focused as it usually was. She looked up in confusion. Maybe you should rest a moment before another attempt. You look exhausted. Noble tried to pull her friend aside, but Sarai stepped out of her reach. I was just unsteady for a moment, she argued. If I was close, I don't want to lose the feeling. Let me try one more thing. Reluctantly, the queen stepped aside. I am staying right here in case you lose your balance again. If you feel even one bit unsteady, stop right away. Yes, mother, Sarai teased, but Noble could feel the gratitude for her care. Taking a wide stance, Sarai formed another cyclone of fire. This time it was in front of Fireshing, not around her. Unlike Amira, her fire was wispy and danced as it spun. It had no substance, yet. Closing her eyes, Sarai cupped her hands and called forth the tip of the blazing hurricane to dance on her palm. Twisting her wrist, the funnel turned on its side, aiming at the far wall with its wide, hungry mouth. While not a solid column, it did resemble a ravenous monster ready to devour its prey. Sarai concentrated, trying to block out even the sound of the fire as it spun on itself. The wide end narrowed before shooting out from her palm. The entire missile of flame streaked through the chamber and crashed into the spot where the two missing rings on the wall had left their etchings behind. An explosion rocked the room, shaking debris free from the ceiling. The air became clouded for a moment. As the dust settled, Noble squinted to see the damage that was done. Look! Sarai's mouth opened in shock. The place she had selected to hit was by far the strongest spot in the room. Even under the catastrophic hit, it only cracked before beginning to self-heal. Not even the tyrant would have been able to break through at that spot. But the cracks told Sarai all that she needed to know. Her fire not only had heat. She had hit with enough force to explode the missile and damage the wall. That meant her fire had real, solid substance. Just like the queen's. I did it. She blinked. Noble laughed. You did something all right. That isn't anything like Amira's and is fully your own. A new weapon for your arsenal. Congratulations. Sarai smiled palely. Thank you. I couldn't have done it without you. Now I must insist you sit down. I will get you some water and food while Kosi keeps you company. Noble ushered her friend toward the stone bench. But just as they arrived, Kosi leapt to his feet with a snarl. What's wrong? We are your friends. Noble furrowed her brow. A moment later a rumble answered his, only it was the ground. The earth knocked Sarai off balance and she reached out her hand to catch herself on the weathered stone. But as soon as her palm touched the top of the bench, the hidden lid gave way. Sarai continued to fall until her armpit slammed against the edge of the stone. She grunted in pain. With her back toward the bench, Noble tried to mitigate the fall and helped her friend stand up. Are you hurt? Sarai rubbed under her arm as she looked at the far wall. I'll be fine. My fire missile seems to have caused more than just cracks in the wall. I think it was more likely an aftershock left over from earlier. Noble pushed the memory of the insidious poison aside as her conscience tried to whisper about the dangers of it once more. She turned her mouth up slightly. But surely the shaking wasn't bad enough to warrant breaking the bench. Noble hadn't felt the tremors since she was floating, but Kosi had managed to keep his footing. Granted, he had cat-like reflexes. His poise had made Sarai's action seem dramatic by comparison. I didn't break the bench, the younger woman defended herself. It opened. Sarai processed her own words as well. Turning to observe the bench, both women looked closely at what had happened for the first time. What they had always assumed was a solid bench now had the stone lid halfway in the box tilted awkwardly to one side. How did you? Noble furrowed her brow. In all the times Council or Sarai had sat there before, it had never done this trick. Even when Amira sat primly with her hands folded in her lap, the bench chest had remained solid. I am not sure. Sarai bit her lip. Noble tried to use her ability to lift the lid out of place, but it stayed firmly in place. That's strange. It shouldn't have been heavy enough to give Noble too much trouble, but it felt more solid than even the train that she had thrown while defending against the gate. The professor's eyes swirled with curiosity. Like the walls, the stone was enchanted. That was why it was the only piece of furniture left in the room after all of these years. Somehow Sarai had broken the seal and opened the chest. But no matter what Noble did, she could not move it a centimeter more. It won't budge. Can you do whatever it was you did again? Noble asked politely. It wasn't anything special. I was falling and braced myself on the bench like this. Sarai demonstrated. Oh. As soon as her hand touched the stone, her bracelet slipped down and made contact as well. The metal shone with a dull luminescence. Pulling her hand away, Sarai removed the bracelet and set it on the lid. Try moving it now. Noble nodded. Already on it. The stone lid scraped against the inner wall of the chest. Slowly but surely, it lifted away to reveal the contents inside. Sarai's eyes widened. Books. Books. Noble exclaimed at the time. Those are the missing books. Noble picked up the first, and 2 pages fluttered out unattached. That coupled with the yellow cover told her all she needed to know. This was the volume that Amira had taken from her months ago. I guess she got the pages before we could, Noble mused. She picked them up off the ground and looked at them briefly. There were 2 circles written on one page with an accompanying drawing while the second was a map of something she had not seen before. I am sure it will make more sense in context. Tucking the pages into the cover of the book, Noble looked at the rest of the contents. There were close to 100 journals packed in the stone encasement. How had Amira gotten them down there without at least someone noticing? Or perhaps someone noticed, and they were silenced one way or another. Noble had no time to contemplate the old queen's method. She was far more concerned with the contents of Emria's deception. She studied the stacks. By the age and color, I think they are all from King Kron. That was the king whose daughter had the obsessed lover. Sarai opened another book to peek inside. That is the one, Noble nodded. Since nothing else we have found seems to have detailed information on the tyrant, surely he will. Especially since the Lord of the Mountain seems to have appeared during his reign. It was strange. All the leaders before Kron which Noble had read did not mention a protective array or a monster that was attacking the kingdom. And all of the leaders afterward, which were mostly read by Sarai, only mentioned the Lord of the Mountains in passing and all but one failed to talk about the protective array. It was like there was some unspoken taboo about mentioning such things even in the sovereign's private journals. If Amira had gone to the trouble of even removing the books from the library, then she must have known that they contained something which Noble needed. The professor tapped the yellow cover in her hand. What secrets do you have for me? She whispered. The question was answered by footsteps on the stairs. Not good. Stop right there. Noble called. It's me. Is everything all right? Rather than obey the command, a concerned counsel hurried down the flight of stairs even faster. I felt another tremor, and I became worried that. What? Are those the missing books? They are, Noble said slowly. My aunt just found them. Isn't that wonderful? Counsel paused, taking the book from the queen's hand. He opened the cover and saw the torn-out pages tucked inside. He frowned. While I am very glad that these have been discovered, I cannot help but wonder how they got down here at all. You know, placed in a stone bench and entombed in a remote corner of the palace. That is indeed curious. Noble's heart beat faster. I am also interested in how the books were found. What made you try to look in something that appears solid, Your Grace? Counsel kept his face neutral, but Noble knew it was more than idle curiosity. It was the tremor. It knocked me off balance and my bracelet touched the stone. I did not know that would open the chest. Sarai kept her voice steady, but inside she was panicking. I suppose you miraculously found the right key for the right lock. Counsel glanced at the golden band, which was still sitting on top of the discarded lid. That is most fortunate. It really is. Noble agreed. And you are just in time to help us get it upstairs. Noble picked up a pile of books and held it out for Counsel to take. Tucking the loose pages into his garment for safekeeping, the man shut the book and accepted the additional tomes. Noble took a second pile in her hands. You shouldn't need to carry things, Your Majesty. There are servants for that. Counsel glanced at the former queen, who was also picking up a stack, and amended his words to Noble. But if you feel compelled to bring some of the priceless treasures with me, I would like to have a word with you. Of course, I am sure the three of us have a lot to discuss with this new discovery. Noble smiled brightly and motioned for Sarai to follow. But Counsel shook his head. I want to speak with you, alone. Noble could tell by the Counsel's emotions that the conversation he had in mind would not be a happy one. Still, she kept a pleasant smile. I would be honored. Aunt. Noble tilted her head at Sarah apologetically. Do not worry. I will wait for a servant to come for these books. I need to retrieve my bracelet when they are done anyway. Sarai touched her naked wrist. We will send someone along shortly. Kosi, will you stay with her grace? Noble could tell the golden creature was still wary after the last little quake, so she felt a little bad about asking him to remain. Kosi purred softly. He says he will guard her grace with his life. Counsel furrowed his brow. He pressed his lips together, keeping back whatever thought was aching to leap forth from his mouth. Thank you, dear one. Noble would have petted the Simkus goodbye except that her hands were full. She was forced to settle for a gracious smile. Counsel allowed Noble to walk up the stairs in front of her. Like a gentleman, he planned to catch her in the pile of books if she fell. Except I am floating, so falling isn't usually an option. There seems to be a lot of ground movement today. Noble tried to make small talk as they rose. There was a rumbling from the far-off mountains before the last one. So it might not have been related to what I might or might not have caused. Counsel glanced over his shoulder to make sure Amira was not following them. A rumbling from the mountains. Does that happen often? Being almost exclusively in the palace, Noble hadn't been paying much attention to the ashy peaks in the distance. Only sometimes, her companion answered vaguely. Other times it comes from deep in the earth. Some myths say a creature lurks down there in wait. Before she could ask a follow-up question, they reached ground level and turned down a narrow hall. The man's neutral face shifted as he whispered in a conspiratorial tone. So, what are you going to do? I don't understand. Noble lifted one hand to covertly scratch her nose. She was levitating the books anyway, and the dust was so irritating. You have kept your enemy close as you planned, and now you have caught her, the man urged. What will you do now that you have uncovered her lie? Her lie? What lie? And whose? The queen felt like she had begun in the middle of a conversation. It was disorienting. Your aunt. She hid the books. Who else could do that? It was just her bad luck that she accidentally opened it in front of you, or you never would have known they were down there. I wouldn't be surprised if she hides or burns the others before they make it to the room. Though that would seal her fate. Slow down. Noble felt her head spin. I am going to start with that last part. What do you mean by seal her fate? If it comes out that she betrayed you even as she was confirming you as queen, what is left of her support will dissolve into nothing. She will be forced to live under the law and be tried as a traitor, or have to flee into the wilderness and take her chances with the tyrant. The triumph in Counsel's voice was unmistakable. Noble saw a lot of flaws in the man's logic, not the least of which was that the real Amira was powerful enough to char both of them to a crisp if she had decided to do an encore performance of what had melted the Great Hall. What if I do not want to brand my aunt as a traitor? Noble decided to make it a question instead of a statement. It is wise to leave your hands clean. You could allow me to spread the news of her grace's wrongdoing with the old guard and disseminate it to the appropriate parties. The problem will take care of itself in no time. Counsel seemed satisfied. Please tell me he isn't talking about another assassination attempt. Nickel can only thwart so many. I do not want any harm to come to my aunt, Noble told her protector firmly. I left Kosi to protect her for a reason. Counsel seemed to miss a step before quickening his pace to walk beside her. Confusion was written all over his face. Are you serious? But, the books, you are willing to forgive her. I do not believe the woman downstairs hid these books. You were not there. She was far too surprised by the discovery. Noble took a deep breath. While the original Amira was in fact guilty of treachery, Sarai was innocent of all wrongdoing. It was a strange situation. And not one that was easily explained. If it could be explained at all to someone that was a construct of the nightmare. Even after all your aunt has done to thwart you, you would still give her the benefit of the doubt. Why must you trust someone so unworthy? Counsel huffed along in silence for a bit. Is there anything I can do to convince you of my aunt's innocence and goodwill? Noble tried at last. When her companion spoke again, his words were slow and measured. How can I instantly forgive her years of oppression and hatred towards me? People like that don't change overnight. You are acting like she is a whole new person. She is, Noble said, earning an incredulous glare. And I am just supposed to forget the past and start fresh. He scoffed. That would be nice, yes. The Queen nodded slowly. It is something I cannot do. At least not at a moment's notice. Counsel sighed. When did this all become so complicated? A few months ago, give or take. Noble pressed her lips together. If time is what you need, I can give it to you. Perhaps you can take a break and come back refreshed. If Counsel couldn't get on the same team, then maybe he needed to be removed from the situation until tension lessened. Are you releasing me as your counsel? The man furrowed his brow. Only if you want that, Noble answered. There is no longer a threat on your life. You should be able to live it however you please. I want you to have the freedom you crave and live a happy life. And when it comes to a happy life, I know someone who is very fond of you. If you mean Pen. Counsel lowered his voice as they neared the royal suite. Unless the two attendants were in their rooms across the hall, they would be inside tidying the rooms. I do mean her, Noble confirmed. She is lovely, but if you don't fancy her, what if I want to remain here and not take a break? Counsel cut off the Queen, startling her. Noble thought for a moment. Then you will have to find a way to get along with my aunt. The blonde protector stood in the doorway, considering his options for a long time. I have a different solution. If he says to kill Sarai, I swear I am going to. Counsel nodded in determination. If I cannot make you see the light about your aunt, then I will work even harder to make myself indispensable to you instead. Then, when the time finally comes, I will be the one you choose. Pleased with his choice, Counsel found a way to open the door. He bowed with his stack of books in hand. After you, Your Majesty. Noble was not sure how to argue with Counsel's statement. Sarai would never make her choose between the two of them, so the situation that the man feared would never come to be. And trying hard to make himself indispensable would either force him to be at least cordial to the woman who looked like Amira or keep him too busy to interact with her at all. Neither of those things are bad, right? She mused. Setting down the books on a low table, Counsel placed his hand on his chest. If you will excuse me, I will find someone to guard your room. You are not staying to read. Noble quirked an eyebrow. Do you want me to stay? The man's voice had a little too much hope. It was like needles to Noble's heart. I thought you would be as curious as I am, she deflected. We are so close to getting our answer. Will Her Grace be staying also? The man's fingers flexed and relaxed. That was my intention. The Queen nodded. Unless you require me to stay, I will make myself useful elsewhere. There was a hint of challenge in Counsel's voice. Did the Queen really mean it when she said she wanted him to be able to live his own life and make his own choices? Noble smiled and dipped her head in recognition. Of course, I can handle it from here. If you need assistance on a project, please let me know. Yes, Your Majesty. I will find someone to guard the door until Kosi returns to you. Counsel turned and looked once more at the pile of books. May I? Of course. As long as you return them as soon as you are through. Noble offered. Taking one from the bottom of the pile, Counsel tucked a journal under his arm. I still cannot believe Her Grace's bracelets were the key to the chest. Are yours the same? The judgment was lost from his voice, replaced by curiosity. Noble looked down at her wrists. I didn't try it, but I would imagine they are the same. I certainly hope so, the handsome man mused. Because if it can randomly open solid stone, I wonder what other secrets it holds. That's a very good question. The Queen had begun to wonder the same. Noble already knew that they hid the monarch's true power from the world, and now one had revealed the hidden treasure trove of books. What else could the enchanted jewelry do? Before the conversation could continue, someone knocked at the door. Noble bid them to enter, and a score of servants came through the door with piles of books in their hands. Among them, Pen and Lenore filed in from across the hall. "Your Majesty, is everything all right?" Pen curtsied as she tried to avoid being jostled by the sudden sea of humanity and paper. "Just a little light reading material, Pen. Nothing to worry about. You may put some of those here and the rest over there." Noble directed the servants around the suite. Under the pressure of the advisors and council, Noble had reluctantly taken over the royal suite. She and Sarai had meticulously moved Amira's things to another set of rooms in the hope of finding the missing books. Noble looked on now as those very books were carted into the room. Funny how things work sometimes. Getting to work, Pen guided the other servants to do the Queen's bidding while Lenore went to work clearing space for the yellow journals. Soon the process became orderly, allowing Pen to step back and observe. "Excuse me," Counsel startled the young woman with his words. "I wonder if I might have your help for a project." Noble felt Pen's emotions skyrocket. For a moment the Queen thought the woman might faint. The senior servant lowered her gaze. "I would need Her Majesty's permission." "By all means," Noble answered before even being asked. "If Council needs help and you are willing, you have my permission." "Oh no, she really is going to faint." Noble quickly sent a jolt of fearful excitement into Pen so she could remain on her feet. The servant tucked her hair behind her ear and continued to stare at the ground. "If you need my help, Counsel, I would be honored to oblige." "It's settled then." Counsel clapped lightly and brandished a winning smile. If the girl didn't already have feelings for him, she does now. That smile could rival the sun. Noble wondered if Counsel's aspect extended to nonverbal communication. She had noticed that when he tried, he could persuade anyone but the Queen to do almost anything. Did he even notice, or was it automatic? Too charming for his own good. I hope it works out for him, both of them. Noble could see how happy Pen was. "I will see you both later." The Queen gave them her blessing to leave. With so many hands at work, it didn't take long for everything to be placed neatly around the room. Once again, the royal suite had been turned into a small library. Hopefully, this was the final time. Noble wanted answers. "Thank you." Noble dismissed the extra people from her quarters with a gracious nod. Lenore stayed behind for a moment before offering to get refreshments from the kitchen. As soon as she stepped into the hall, she paused and curtsied. "Your Grace, may I help you?" "No need, Lenore, I am almost there now," Sarai answered her. The redhead came in with a final stack of books. Behind her, Kosi sauntered in chewing on a bone of some sort. Hopefully it was just a treat from the palace kitchen. "Sorry that it took so long. It took Kosi and me a little longer than anticipated to get the lid back on the bench and make sure it was sealed again." Sarai explained her delayed arrival. She set down the books and rubbed her wrists. "I'm not used to wearing jewelry. Did the bands not cut into your wrists while you were carrying the books?" Noble winced. "Well, I wasn't exactly carrying them. I floated them up here." "Of course, you did." Rolling her eyes, Sarai slipped off the offending bracelets and set them in a special tray by the door. She wouldn't need them while she was reading anyway. "Where shall we start?" Noble looked at the room and hummed softly. "I think we first need to organize them by putting them in order, and then we can start piecing together this puzzle. Let me get us some paper so we can take notes. I think we will need it." By the time refreshments arrived with Lenore, the royal women had gotten the books back in order. They settled down with some tea and began at each end of the king's reign to work towards the middle. It was going to be a lot of work reading and note-taking, but neither lady wanted to trust a scribe with the information they hoped to find. So they settled in to begin their studies. After a sip of warm, invigorating liquid, Noble picked up the oldest yellow journal and opened to the first page with a sigh. It was going to be a long rest of the day. And an even longer night. Both of the women considered themselves avid readers. Even with their time in the Dreamscape and full-time jobs, they still found time to devour books in their spare time. But the past weeks' months for Noble had left them somewhat drained. Slogging through pages of mundane daily interactions in hopes of finding a single nugget that might help them was taxing. But they couldn't slack off. Especially not when they could feel that they were close to a breakthrough. Closing another book, Sarai picked up her writing utensil. She dipped it in the inkwell next to her on the side table before she scribbled some notes. Putting her tome aside, Noble watched the pen move across the page while she took a sip of water. After setting down the cup, she sighed softly. Judging by how long ago dinner had been brought to the room, it was at least an hour after dark. Noble's eyes were tired from their repetitive movement across countless pages. She hoped a bit of conversation would renew her mind. "Find anything good?" she asked cheerily. Unfortunately, whatever Sarai had found did not make her excited. The redhead sighed. "Not necessarily good, but it is interesting." "Tell me, please," Noble encouraged with open palms. It was also good to touch base from time to time. One of their findings could trigger the other to make an even more important discovery. "It's not much on its own. Just another piece of the puzzle." Putting down her paper, Sarai's hands dropped into her lap. "At the end of that book, I found an answer to your query about King Kron's daughter. You know, the one that crazy man fell in love with." "I remember." Noble could almost recite the story by heart now. Sarai nodded. "Well, I just found the final record of her. Princess Mondra died at the palace from a fever. From what I understand, she never married." Oh, Noble wasn't exactly sure how to feel about the news. Deep down, she had hoped that Mondra had gotten the storybook ending with a white knight riding in to save the day at the last possible moment and sweeping her off of her feet for a lifetime of marital bliss. "Before you get too sad, Kron says she was surrounded by her family and lived to an old age, for us at least. I know people here can live much longer." The redhead furrowed her brow. Poor Kron though. Noble could relate to the ancient king. No matter a parent's age, outliving a child was incredibly painful. If Noble didn't die in this nightmare or suffer some other gruesome fate, it was possible that she could outlive the rest of her family as well. Because the spell had not been around long enough in the waking world, it was unknown if being awakened lengthened a person's life to any significant degree. Only time would tell. "I am sure he was glad he could be there to comfort her in her final moments," Noble said at last. Sarai nodded. She set aside the book and picked up the next one. Even after hours, they had barely made it through a quarter of the books. Kron's rule was toward the beginning of the middle era of the kingdoms, so while his speech was easier to read, it was still rather dense. Kron's reign had been longer than most of the other monarchs, causing him to have more information to cover. And, perhaps most significantly, Kron felt the need to meticulously document everything that happened in his day, even copying over letters and communications that he felt were worth saving. Which was a lot of extra work, but also gave the ladies more than one point of view on important matters. For instance, Sarai had been able to read the speech that Mondra's brother had shared at her funeral. The princess had been very well loved. Alas, it was time to move on. Or back, in Sarai's case, since she had started with the end of Kron's life. Noble had offered to switch, of course, since her friend had already had to read history backward in the royal library, but Sarai had gotten used to the process, enjoyed it even. It was like reading a novel from end to beginning. Because she knew how things finished, Sarai became more and more interested in how they began. As she penned another piece of valuable information, Noble suddenly shifted beside her. "Incoming," the queen's eyes swirled. "You mean you found something?" Sarai looked up from her papers. "Who dares disturb my slumber?" A deep voice echoed through the room. Noble rolled her eyes. "I didn't find something. I found someone. Come on out, Nickel." One of the many hidden passageways opened and a man stepped out of the shadows. "You couldn't even play along for a second." Nick clicked his tongue. "I suppose I should have," Noble shrugged. "Next time I will. I will also be having a stern talk with General Theo about the security in the palace. You slip in and out far too easily. I love that you think tighter security will make the slightest bit of difference when it comes to me," the thief chuckled. "Laundry. What are you doing here?" "Not that I'm complaining." Sarai's warm smile stopped the man from making a snide remark. Noble called me on that memory of hers. Said you needed help with reading. Looking around the room, Nickel shook his head. Seems like you have your work cut out for you. This is nothing compared to what we have been doing, but I am very motivated to get through all of this as soon as possible, Noble admitted. Thanks for coming. Nick brushed aside the gratitude. What do you need from me? Sarai and I are systematically going through the books. I would like you to do your thing and find and read the most important ones for anything we might have missed. Noble explained. The man crossed his arms. Do my thing. You think it is that easy? Pausing, the queen bit her lip. Isn't it? Nickel sighed. It is. Pass me something to write on and I'll start picking things out. With 3 working instead of 2, work picked up. This king of the mountains sounds like a real jerk, Nickel scowled. Reminds me of someone else I know. He pretended to flick long, blonde hair behind his shoulder. That's not very kind, Noble scrunched her face. The thief smirked. I was unkind to whom? The king or the person you know I was referencing? Noble tilted her nose up into the air. I'll put it this way, you can insult the king all you like. I don't care for him either. Any man who put pressure on a father to force his daughter into an unhappy marriage was worse than scum in her book. I take it he doesn't redeem himself then. Nickel mused. Not surprising. Jerks don't change. Noble ignored his implication. We will know more when we get through all this reading, she deflected. The other 2 nodded. There was no arguing with that. They got back to work. Nickel's unique perspective and persistence filled the ladies with renewed energy, and as the night wore on, they began to finally get a picture of the secret that Amira had been hiding. That every king and queen since Kron had been hiding from their subjects. And it was big. Hand me that one. Noble stuck out her tongue slightly as she received the desired page and placed it in the proper location. Don't forget this one. Nickel picked up another page of his notes. I don't think either of you have this covered. A few more minutes passed with feverish working and reworking of the order of things. Some things in the journals had been presented out of sequence due to when the king thought to report his musings, so a few of the events could only be properly settled after a lively debate. With a final movement, the 3 stepped back from their handiwork. There, I think that about does it. Sarai tilted her head to look at the papers arranged on the ground. Wow, that is a lot of information. Noble had used her ability to move all the furniture to the walls so they could piece the unconventional puzzle together. Some pages were ripped to remove info that had seemed important at the time but later turned out to be useless. The rest was patched together until the full picture was revealed. The entire floor of the sitting room was covered with pages like a massive rug. The sheer size of the story map they had created was nothing short of humbling. Not as pretty at the Mindweaver's tapestry, Sarai smiled remembering the gift she had gotten in the Dreamscape, but it does paint a pretty clear picture of how things happened. Nickel grunted. Not exactly a masterpiece if you ask me. More of a horror story than a fairy tale. Noble scanned the pages, her face grim. It reads exactly as I would expect. It's a nightmare. What Noble had found in the first book months ago was where the incredible story of King Kraai began. For that was the name of the king in the mountains. When Kraai had sworn to Kron of Crestfall that he would find out the truth about how to win Mondra's love, it had not been an empty promise. Thankfully, out of love for his daughter and concern for his kingdom, Kron had paid the king of the mountains' personal servant a hefty bribe to give detailed reports of his master's progress. Among other things, those private communications were included as part of Kron's journals. The first letters of the correspondent spoke of Kraai's desperation and determination. The spurned lover was going to call on his patron to help him. But his patron was not a god. It was a demon, and after a time of searching, Kraai was successful. The scribe, who did not sign any of his letters, described the interaction. The demon met my master in the Jade Court. I hid, not wanting that fateful gaze to find me. You would like a favor? The demon asked. The voice alone filled me with dread beyond measure. Somehow my master was able to withstand the burden of the noise. You were good to my ancestor once, giving her a great gift. The king did not mention what the gift was, only looked about the room. I remember the queen and the gift, the demon answered. I could not tell if the voice was pleased or angered by the reminder. Like her, I have served you faithfully and now I come asking for something no less precious. Perhaps even more so. King Krai could not hide the excitement in his voice. I think the demon could sense it too. What is it you require? I need to find the true way to my love's heart. My master's placed his hand on his chest. I seek the truth. There was silence for a long time. If I had not been peeking between the pillars, I would have wondered if the powerful being had left. Are you sure? The demon's words cut at me like a knife. I could hear the screaming warning in them not to continue. But my master had no reservations. I am sure. The demon looked around the room as if remembering something. A sigh filled the room like a rushing wind. Very well. The demon opened one hand and a small black ball appeared in it. My king stared at it for a moment, confused by the strange gift. Before his majesty could question the powerful being, the demon dropped the ball into my king's hand. His whisper seeped into every corner of the palace. The truth is not always beautiful, but it is always powerful. With that, the demon left. That was 3 days ago. My master has not left his room since. I overheard the servants who brow him dinner gossiping that he has not figured out how to make the ball work and is begging the demon to return with instructions. I cannot say for sure if this is true. I will let you know when I have more information. Well, that does settle it once and for all, doesn't it? My suspicions were correct. Nickel chewed at the inside of his cheek. The two women stared at him, unsure of what conclusion they were missing. The Jade Court doesn't ring any bells. The thief sighed. King Krai lived in Ravenheart. Oh. Sarai's eyes shone with excitement. That means if we can get a map that shows the old king's castle, then we can pinpoint where we are as well. That was something, though Noble wasn't sure how useful the information would be unless Nickel or Sarai had more knowledge of the topography than she did. Still, any additional information was helpful. It just wasn't always comforting. As expected, Kron had felt uneasy about the news from his anonymous correspondent. A demon interfering with human affairs was a rare thing. And since Krai had valued the demon even above the gods, the king of Crestfall was concerned that such a rare gift would bring calamity on her dearest Mondra. Months passed, but just as Kron was beginning to hope that nothing would happen, another letter arrived to confirm his worst fears. My master has learned how to use the ball, but he believes the wretched bauble was only given to him to mock him. No matter which way the tries to word his questions toward the magical orb, the answer is that the princess of Crestfall will never be his. He does not accept this conclusion. He plans to try for a few days more, but if he cannot get the answer he seeks, he will march on your kingdom and take the princess by force. Based on other writings, Noble knew the region which the people of the mountains controlled was much larger than the simple city-state where she currently resided. The forces coming against Crestfall, if properly organized, would be completely overwhelming. Kron knew his daughter, Mondra, would never agree to marry the monstrous man that lived in the Jade Palace. So the king did what he thought was best. Kron prepared for battle to defend both his kingdom and his family. In the end, the king of Crestfall got a war. He faced it ready to fight until his dying breath. Noble turned her gaze to the next scene, watching the story unfold in her mind's eye. Krai did not get the answer he wanted from the gift. The ball could only tell the truth, after all. So he marched on the small kingdom of Crestfall with the full force of his army. Seeing how much harm her refusal had created, Mondra tried to talk some sense into the crazed king of the mountains. The beautiful princess sent a letter begging him to reconsider. When that did not work, she even considered accepting his marriage proposal, but Kron decided that was tantamount to surrender. Giving up his daughter after he was surrounded meant giving up his kingdom as well. And that was something he simply could not do. So they fought. The bloody battle did not go as Krai expected. His huge force was unable to breach the fortress's alabaster walls. Like the stone from the Jade Palace, it was nearly impenetrable. Months passed. Things began to get desperate for the cut-off city kingdom. But each time the citizens of Crestfall thought they might starve, another mysterious influx of food would come from the palace. No one asked where it came from, but many suspected it was conjured up by some magic from their monarch. Really, it was smuggled in from the vast tunnels under the city. But as that secret needed to remain absolute, no one who ever went underground was ever able to leave the palace again. That was the price of safety in war. After 2 years and no progress, the men under Krai's rule began to lose heart. Many abandoned their post in the dead of night to return to their families while others did their best to avoid the front lines. Demoralized, the king of the mountains was forced to either join the battle himself or withdraw. Unwilling to let Kron see him battered and bleeding, Krai chose the latter option and returned to the mountains. A sane man would have given up and cut his losses, but Krai instead formed a new plan. He would find the hidden high temple and cry out for someone to answer his plea. Somehow Krai's servant survived the chaos of battle and faithfully recorded the event for Noble to read. King Krai's determination is unwavering and his focus singular. He claims Princess Mongrel has bewitched him. No one has been able to convince him otherwise. So he has sought out the only one who he thinks may be able to ease his burden, the Heart God. I did not think he would succeed, but at last, we came upon the secluded temple and the acolytes who lived there. The temple servants almost refused the king entrance. I wish they had. Yet they reluctantly admitted as to avoid punishment, leaving any judgment to the gods. Inside the inner sanctum, my master wailed his woe toward the heavens. The air was thin and I thought my king would pass out from his screams, but I think his lungs must not be normal. If I were to be candid, he seems more beast than man lately. When he had called out until he was finally out of breath, King Krai then pulled out a dagger from his waist and looked at me with a hungry expression. Realizing his intention, I stepped back and begged him to reconsider. What good am I to you if I am dead? I reminded him. Sighing, he turned the point of his knife on himself and cut his hand. My master held his palm over the altar, letting his own blood mingle with other sacrifices. The sight was sickening. I did all I could not to retch. Then the thin air became thick and oppressive. I shut my eyes and fell to my knees. If being before the demon was difficult, being in the presence of this god was much worse. My emotions were no longer my own, and I felt an alien hunger within myself raging to get out. I was so beside myself that I cannot recall all that happened, but I do know the end result. After explaining his problem and showing off the ball from the demon, the god of hearts grew angry. What has this to do with me? I need you to change my love's heart to match my own, King Krai demanded. My own heart nearly stopped. How could a mere mortal make such a brazen request? The heart god spoke so loudly that my ears felt like they would split. The words overlapped and echoed. I could not comprehend them. Then the mysterious presence was gone. When I opened my eyes and lifted my head from the stone floor, King Krai was hunched over, kneeling on the ground. For a moment, I thought he might have died of fright. But as I came close, he was still breathing. What happened? I asked. My master looked up at me with an unreadable expression. The heart god said that since the princess had no love in her heart for me, then to match, my heart will have no love at all. My king held out his hand. The ball in his palm looked different. Rather than just have blackness in it, it seemed to pulse with life. Since my heart could not contain the truth, now the truth will contain my heart. Krai clutched the ball back to his chest as if he could press it back behind his ribs. It did no good. There was no way to rejoin the man with his heart. I did not think he would live without the precious organ, yet somehow he did not die. After what felt like an eternity, the acolytes of the temple returned to see what had become of us. I could tell by their nervous expressions that they knew their patron had visited. As more and more of them flooded into the sacred space, I could sense our welcome was quickly drawing to a close. Yet the king remained as still as a statue. Master, I tried, I think it is time we head home. I have no home and no heart. King Krai replied at last. He stood, and I saw a wound on his back where part of his armor was missing. My master didn't seem to notice. He was too busy cradling the black orb in his hand. This is all that is left of what my heart once was. A cruel smile twisted onto his face as he looked at me. When I saw the look in his eye, I shivered. There was his madness there like it always was, but there was something more. A darkness I did not dare name. I wish I could say that I think Princess Mondra is safe now that King Krai feels nothing for her, but I cannot in good conscience report this news. As soon as we left the temple and rejoined our small military force, the king was already scheming his next plan. While he will not share his plan, I know that we are not headed back to the Jade Palace. We are headed deeper into the Ashen Mountains. My master may be insane, but he is immensely powerful. These men will not dare disobey him. I hope for your sake and your daughter's sake that we will not return any time soon. But I fear that we will be on your doorstep before you know it. Be ready. Kron readied his weary army for battle once more. The time of peace was far too short, but it had taught the kingdom to adjust how they farmed and cultivated food. A swath of the city was plowed under to keep crops within the kingdom's walls. At the forefront of the preparations was the princess. When she wasn't helping to ready the kingdom for yet another assault, Mondra hid in the palace. Despite her beauty, no man dared try to claim her hand for fear of evoking the wrath of the vengeful Krai. Mondra swore she did not want to marry anyway. It was at this point that the order of things became murky for the three investigators. But Nickel's keen eye for detail and their collective intuition helped to place the events as chronologically as possible. Rather than risk enemy infiltration, Crestfall closed the front gate indefinitely. Soon small skirmishes occurred here and there, but they seemed to be remnants of the original force who had not found what they were looking for at home. King Krai was not among them. A year passed with only minor attacks. Lookouts were established to let the city know of approaching threats, and the few citizens allowed to leave never strayed too far outside the city walls. Over time, the people began to relax. Yet, King Kron remained diligent. His informant went silent, and the monarch of Crestfall could only assume that the man was dead either from the perilous journey or because his master had discovered his treachery. 15 months after the last letter, the warning horn sounded throughout the city. The people rallied for another skirmish, but there was no army to meet them. Instead, a massive beast lumbered toward the city at great speed. The creature leapt over the wall before a single arrow could attempt to pierce its hide. Not that it would have done any good. The noble creature continued forward until reaching the palace gates. Coming to a stop, the mighty four-legged beast bent down to let two figures slip from its back. And what a mismatched pair they were. One was strong and mighty, clad in black and towering high above the others in the courtyard. In his arms, he held a man who looked like death might claim him any moment. The scene had made those watching think that death itself had come to the palace doors. For a moment, no one dared move. I must speak with the king urgently. The man in black announced when no one seemed eager to approach. And a healer too, if you have one to spare. He indicated the man in his arms. Hesitantly, Kron came out to meet the pair, unsure of what he would find. His eyes opened wide. The half-dead man was the missing correspondent. If he was with this mysterious, powerful figure, where was Krai? Running out of the palace, Mondra tended to the injured man with the help of a physician, while the powerful figure introduced himself as a sorcerer and a priest of the beast god. There is no time. We must protect the city. Kron had no choice but to trust the mysterious man. Reluctantly, the king allowed the sorcerer uninhibited access to the area below the palace. It wasn't until Krai's servant awoke that Kron and Mondra discovered he had lost the ability to speak. That did not stop him from recounting his tale in written form. Unwilling to head back home defeated, my master took us even deeper into the mountains. The air around us alternated between the sweltering heat and terrible cold. It took many of the men's lives. Our band of soldiers became so small that by the time we found the sanctuary only a few dozen were left. Without his heart, the king did not seem to feel the temperature. But I could. I was barely clinging to life when I entered the half-buried temple of the beast god. We were offered food and shelter by the priests there. King Krai refused to eat or drink until he had made his plea, much to his men's dissatisfaction. A few were so crazed with hunger that they considered mutiny then and there. One look from my master put them all to shame. They stayed their swords and dropped to the ground dejectedly. I wanted to join them in their rest, but the king needed me to attend him, as usual. So I followed him through the temple to the altar. This time no sacrifice was needed. The high priest was already awaiting us with a message. It was a refusal. My king was livid. I will not be denied by some crony. I will have my request heard. Master, I spoke through parched lips, perhaps with some food and water we will know how to prose. My words died on my lips as the man I served took me by the throat with inhuman strength. I felt something in me break, and I fell silent. The priest tapped his staff and the room suddenly filled with an oppressive force. I knew what was coming, and so when my master released me, I ran to find the only shelter I could. I hid behind the altar. You dare commit violence here? The voice of the beast god was more than I could bear. I pressed my face to the ground and covered my ears. At last, you are here. The king had no fear. I need your help. You are the only one who can right what has been wronged. My king told of his perilous journey, and of his need to claim the beauty that was in Crestfall. He played upon every part of the beast god's vanity. Finally, he held out the ball and asked that the beast god grant his carnal desires to hunt down those in Crestfall who had wronged him. His Majesty promised to spill all of their blood in the beast god's name in return for the power to destroy his enemies. When I finally got the courage to peek, I saw the beast god receive the black ball. There was no compassion in the god's face. Ariel may have granted your ancestress the ability to look human, but the monster within you has fully consumed your soul. I shall release you back to your natural form and use your heart to protect your enemies. I did not understand the words at first, but then the high priest took the ball from his patron before seeking me out. The tall man in black took me firmly by the arm. Come with me if you want to live. I stood and looked over my shoulder one last time. The sight I saw will forever haunt me. My master's human form ripped and tore from inside as the skin fell away to reveal something much more terrifying hiding within. His raven hair became feathers, covering the wound marring his back. An otherworldly scream emanated from the former king's lips as he tried to chase after his heart. But the priest was faster. We climbed onto a creature and shot out of the temple. The building exploded behind us as my former master continued to grow and change. It was then that I passed out. I have no knowledge of whether the king lived or died from the transformation, nor any knowledge of what happened to the rest of the men in the mountains. All I know is that Kraai is not the man he once was. Although in hindsight, maybe he was never a man to begin with. If he survived, he is a monster of the worst kind. If he comes for revenge, we are all doomed. The copy of the letter brought a sad smile to Noble's mouth. King Kraai hadn't fought the tyrant as the cave drawings had once led her to believe. The ancient king was the tyrant. The rest of the story was easy to discern. The sorcerer priest successfully hid the heart and constructed the magical barrier around the city with his runic knowledge. He also set up the temple for the beast god, which he presided over for the duration of Kron's reign. When Kraai finally found his way to Crestfall, he attacked in the dead of night. But as the runes belonged to a sorcerer and were strengthened by the power of the moon goddess, the monster had no chance. He left wounded without a single member of Crestfall being injured. He would not have been corrupted at that point. That seems to have happened later, Noble noted. He also formed an army at some point, Sarai added. The initial battle attack had been by the king alone, but when he returned later, other creatures were with him. Noble hoped the thralls had been already defiled beasts that he subjugated and not his former subjects. Thinking of the latter possibility made her shiver. The poor informant. Sarai sighed. He never did recover. It was true. After writing down his final message for Kron, the messenger's mind shattered. With all that he had seen, witnessing the power of two gods and a demon, not even the handsome reward provided by King Kron could provide him any peace. Even though Mongrel worked diligently to nurse him back to physical health, there was nothing to be done to fix his broken spirit. He spent his days in silence, eventually making the mural under the palace to rid himself of his nightmares. He remained in the castle until his dying breath. Nick grunted. Yeah, poor miserable dead people who lived long ago. The two ladies looked at him, startled. The man held up his hands. Don't get me wrong. I feel for them, but there is a crucial piece of information missing from these journals. Where did he hide the blasted heart? Noble, too, had noticed the lack of information. Kron had said that no one but the monarch could ever know the information lest it fall into the wrong hands. That was why Noble had only found half-truths and misdirects everywhere else. The sorcerer had gone to the trouble of sealing up the information in the royal library, so it must have been there at some point. There is a volume missing, Nickel observed. I just assumed one of you had it before, but now that we are done. It is not here. Oh, Council. Noble rose slightly and moved toward the door. He borrowed a book when he went to work with Pen. He must still have it. Noble went to summon a servant when she was stopped short by a knock at the door. Pen stood in the doorway with a tray in her hand. Your Majesty, she said a little too loudly as she dropped a curtsy without tipping the contents in her arms. Come in, Pen. Is it morning already? The Queen yawned, answering her own question. Did I wake you? I was told Her Grace was still here, so I took the liberty of bringing some morning refreshments. Thank you, it was very thoughtful. Noble examined the 2 plates of food and then the woman holding them. She frowned. Have you slept? The servant's uniform was crumpled, and her hair did not seem freshly brushed. Small circles were forming under her beautiful eyes. Me? No. I was working with Council on his project. Pen blushed heavily as she searched for a place to put the tray. The most obvious place was the table which held Sarai's golden bracelets. She took a step toward it before Noble caught her attention. Pen. Noble tried to word her question carefully. Something about the woman's bubbling excitement made her concerned. Where did you work on this project? The servant blanched. In the library, of course. I would never do anything to disgrace him or you. I am not worried about me. I am just looking out for you, but as long as you are all right. Noble let out a sigh of relief. I am fine. Better than fine, Your Majesty. I came to request an extension of time to work with him. He says I am a valuable asset. Pen's heart fluttered with the words. You may have the morning, the Queen agreed. She would not have need of both of her maids anyway. But I need the book Council by borrowed back immediately. Oh. Pen selected another place to put the tray and reached into the apron tied around her waist. I was supposed to return this with the meal. Is that what you were looking for? It is. Noble accepted the journal. She flipped it open. But the 2 pages that were torn out are not here. Please ask him to return them before you continue your work. Yes, Your Majesty. Pen was giddy with excitement mixed with fear. The man might not have tried anything during the night, but the woman seemed hopeful that he might this morning. I will see you at lunch. She chirped. Before I go, Council was wondering if he might borrow. Pen hesitated, rethinking her request as she glanced toward the door. Yes. Noble narrowed her gaze. Could we borrow another book? Pen fumbled, averting her eyes. That is fine, Noble agreed after a moment. Just return it more quickly than you did this one. Pen rushed to the door and picked up a yellowed cover. In her haste, she bumped the table it was on and hurried to pick up its contents. Bowing her way out of the room, the elated servant hurried back toward her research partner. That jerk is making that poor girl do his dirty work. Nickel appeared from some hidden corner. He had slipped away as soon as there was a knock at the door, like he had never been there. I will have to gauge Council's interest when I see him next. Maybe pairing them together was not the best idea. Noble pursed her lips. She was eager for her protector to find another object for his affection, but Pen was maybe not the best match. Nickel picked up 2 sweetbreads from the tray of food. I have to go. I have stayed too long as it is. I have a thing to attend to. Another thing. Sarai looked at him pointedly. Does this thing have to do with all the other things you have been doing lately? Nickel and Noble looked at one another, confirming the redhead's suspicion. Then it is probably better for my emotions that I don't know. Sarai tucked her hair behind her ear. Good, because I wasn't going to tell you anyway, Nick blustered. He went to stuff one of the cakes in his mouth when a rustling on the bed caught his attention. Waking from his nap, a golden creature stared at him with innocent eyes and licked his lips. Nick sighed and tossed one of his 2 cakes into the air. Here you go, mutt. Kosi's mouth eagerly accepted the treat. I knew you liked him deep down, Noble smiled. Are you kidding? That was just to keep the demon from eating me instead. I've no idea what lengths he would go to get his paws on that cake. Nickel shrugged. Whatever you say. Noble nodded seriously. Stuffing the second cake in his mouth, Nickel disappeared into the wall. Later, Noble. Take care of fire. I'll handle things on the outside. Noble allowed a small smile and responded through the other's voice. Take care. If you need us, get in touch. With that, Sarai and Noble gathered around the final journal and opened the yellow cover. It was exactly what they had been looking for. For better or worse, Council had been holding the most important piece of the puzzle. The missing journal was different from the others. It was battered and far more worn than any of the other books in the entire royal library because it was the most useful book of them all. The only thing mentioned in the other books was that trying to remove the ball was dangerous. These notes laid out exactly what the priest had done when arriving in Crestfall. This journal, rather than being a chronological account, was a manual. The priest had carved the runes far outside the city walls, though whether he had received divine help was unclear. All that Kron knew was that the runes were in place before sunrise. He wrote a copy of the runes in the journal, but of course, the symbols were not something that would ever be translated by the spell. Noble wished that Nickel had stayed for just a little longer. She copied down the runes to show him and also committed what she could to memory. The strange duelist had been extremely curious about the protection spell. She hoped the information might help him in some unknown way. There is time for all that later. Moving on, Noble and Sarai found notes on the dimension of the cavern where the ball was hidden as well as methods of protection and how to avoid them. The priest had made very sure that the heart would not be found. The only thing missing were the 2 pages that had been ripped from the book. Noble had taken a quick glance at them when she found them, but could not recall them with any great detail. Where was Council? Lenore. Noble yelled out into the hall. Her younger maid came running. Check on Council and Pen. They should have brought me something a long time ago. They should be in the library. Lenore trotted off like a dog on a hunt. Noble shut the door. If she isn't back in 5 minutes, I'm sending you after them, Kosi. The Simkus sniffed. He was up for the challenge. But 3 minutes later, Lenore tapped lightly. She had 2 papers in her hand. Droon asked me to give these to you. The missing pages. Noble took them eagerly from her servant's hand and closed the door with a dip of her head. She wasn't sure why Droon had been in possession of the papers, but right now she didn't care. Her eyes scoured the pages as she squealed. Just as she remembered, the pages had drawings on them. Maps. One was a map of the tunnels and the other was the location of the heart. There was just one problem. The entrance to the caverns did not look like any place she had seen before. What do you think? Noble asked her companion as they studied the page together. Maybe they hid the entrance, Sarai suggested. Could it be by the mural? That cavern has no exit that I saw and no draft, Noble shook her head. Which is strange since the arena certainly had air movement. The redhead mused. That's it. Sarai, you are a genius. The queen threw her arms around her friend's neck. I assumed the arena was built to hide the mural, but what if that is not the only secret that is down there? What if it is hiding the tunnel to the heart as well? It would make some sense. Council has checked everywhere else. Sarai couldn't think of a better explanation. Noble grabbed 2 cloaks from her closet and returned to the main room. She threw one at her companion. There is only one way to find out for sure. Come on. Pulling the hoods up around their heads, the 2 women made their way to the place where the ancient knights of old had battled without ever knowing that mural with a terrible secret lay behind one wall. And, if Noble was correct, the place held an even more sinister secret as well. She lit the small rivulet of oil, allowing the room to fill with soft light. Nothing appeared out of the ordinary, but deep down Noble felt that things were not as they seemed. Kosi, can you find the draft? Noble asked once the Simkus had reached the bottom of the stairs. The demon sniffed at the air experimentally. Then, after a little deliberation, he pointed to the one corner of the room still bathed in shadows. Noble furrowed her brow. A memory struck her. Was that not the corner that Amira was hiding in when she saw Noble use sorcery for the first time? Noble had just assumed that the queen was watching them from the darkness, waiting to make her move. But what if she wasn't spying on the pair at all, and had only happened upon them by accident? If that were the case, then Amira would have had another reason for being down here. Noble, Sarai asked slowly. I see them. The queen moved slowly to the corner of the wall. She had always assumed that the 2 missing rings had been lost to time, but now she wasn't so sure. There were no handles to indicate where the rings had ever been. More than that, Noble had noticed how smooth and perfectly round the indents were. Almost as if the thing that fit in them was precious. Noble held up her hand to touch the circle when the sleeve of her gown slid down her arm. The metal band pressed up against the stone and began to glow with a soft radiance. The bracelets, the ladies said in unison. I left mine upstairs, Sarai lamented. In her haste, she hadn't even looked for the jewelry that she had left by the door. It should be fine. I think we only need 1 pair anyway. Noble slid the bands off of her hands and pressed them into the grooves of the wall. They sank until they clicked softly. The hair on the back of Kosi's neck stood on end as he hissed. A rush of cold air blew Noble's hood back and pushed her hair away from her face. She lifted her hand to shield her eyes while simultaneously summoning the unlikely end. The ground rumbled softly, as the edges of a door cracked through the stone and made their presence known. The door slid silently on invisible hinges, bringing even more cold air into the stuffy arena. It was as if the cold air of the mountains was being thrust into the room from the darkness of the opening. We found it. Noble looked at the forbidden hall with eyes wide open. She lowered the hand protecting her eyes but kept the other ready with her weapon in hand. Sarai, too, had called on the aching ember to assist her. When nothing immediately jumped out of the eerie passageway, Noble relaxed slightly. She sent her sense into the hall to make sure it was empty. Then, tucking the estoc in the sash of her gown, she pulled out the pages of the map. The queen looked at Sarai with a half-smile. So, who wants to go first? Would you prefer to navigate or watch out for the traps? Sarai deferred to her friend. But by the smirk on her face, she already knew the answer. Even with the map, I will still run us into trouble. You tell me what to watch out for, and I will keep us safe. Noble passed the map to the fiery awakened. Both women looked at Kosi. The Simkus was clearly not meant for the small door that had formed. It was taller inside the tunnel but seemed to be made to fit no one bigger than the beast god's priest. Another safeguard against the tyrant since his human form was taken from him. What do you think? Do you want to try and come? Noble asked the golden-haired creature. Sniffing at the entrance, Kosi snorted. His face twisted in a way that Noble had never seen. The Simkus whined and pawed at the ground. Seeing his reticence, Noble patted him lightly. It's okay. You can stay here. We will be back soon. Kosi whined again, rubbing Noble with the top of his head. I wish I had Council's gift to know what he is saying. Noble smiled and hugged the concerned creature around the neck, well as far around his new puffy mane as her arms could reach. We will be back soon. You can wait here. If something goes wrong, find Council right away. Noble would fill the other protector in on her discovery when she returned. The curiosity to see what the tunnels held was too great. She could almost hear it whispering to her, beckoning her forward with an irresistible pull. Kosi whined once more, before laying down dejectedly and placing his chin on his paws. It was the most adorable thing she had seen outside of her children's antics. Sweet Kosi, Noble blew him a kiss goodbye. Then she summoned 2 memories. The first was the most necessary. It was the lucent taper. There was no visible light in the tunnel, and bringing a luminous memory made more sense than carrying a torch. The candle flickered in her hand. The second memory she called was the bread crumbs. Taking a step, Noble looked behind her to see the luminescent crumbs she left behind. Can you see those? She asked Sarai, motioning to the glowing tidbits. See what? The redhead furrowed her brow as she looked behind the other woman. Holding out her hand, Noble allowed Sarai to touch the oddly shaped stone. Oh! The fiery woman gasped. What are those? These are breadcrumbs. The map should lead us straight to where we need to go, but if we somehow end up in a labyrinth underground, this will be our assurance that we can get back to the surface. Noble explained. That answers the question of if others can see it. There was a small part of Noble that wondered if everyone could see her glowing trail when she had chased Derek. It was a relief to know that the only one aware of her folly was herself. Sarai summoned her protective tunic and a helmet for her head before pulling her cloak around both. If she was going to be looking down at the papers, it was a good idea to protect her body and head. Not that Noble would ever let anything happen to her. Passing the candle to Sarai and tucking the breadcrumbs away, Noble pried the bracelets from their home and put them back on her wrists. Then, drawing her sword, she entered the abyssal darkness. Hurry! Noble heard the soft rumble of the ground that had precipitated the door opening. Sure enough, it swung shut, catching the edge of Sarai's cloak. The younger woman pulled it free just in time. Whoa! The inside of the door looked much different. Instead of a stone facade, it looked like a steel frame encasing glass. The two ladies could still peer inside the arena as if they were looking through a massive window. The golden simcas lay on the floor exactly where they had left them. Sarai waved. Hello, Kosi. Of course, the sad creature could not see them, but his ears perked up at the sound. Oh, the redhead covered her mouth. Sound travels. I hope he knows it was me and doesn't think it was a ghost. There are already some palace boys who think this area is haunted. I still wonder if Amira did that on purpose or accident. Noble allowed a small smile to come to her face. As much as Noble wanted to hate Amira to feel better about going after the throne, the thought of her having a sense of humor and scaring little boys into behaving made her laugh. It was more likely that she wanted to keep the secret of the tunnel safe, but Noble liked that explanation less. The one-way window must also be how Amira knew when to time her exits. If the queen came down here often, then it was the only explanation as to how Noble and Council had never seen the door open before. And that is why this area is the least likely to crack. It has the strongest magic supporting it. It was truly a marvel. As Kosi settled down to nap, the women pulled their eyes away from the strange magical doorway. They hadn't come to see it anyway. Speaking the names of light and growing brighter, Noble lengthened the lucent taper's reach. Noble couldn't pull light out of the darkness, at least not yet, so enhancing the available light was the best she could do. But it was enough. Since the hall was narrow and not terribly tall, they could see all around them without any problem. There would be no chance for a surprise attack unless a creature burrowed through the walls. But that seemed extremely unlikely. The sorcerer had not made Crestfall's protection simply a dome, he had made it a complete sphere. So somewhere deep below them and out to both sides, the matching invisible barrier protected them from outside forces just like the surface. Crestfall existed in a gigantic bubble. And if Noble had anything to say about it, it always would, safe from any harm once the tyrant was dead. No matter what became of this nightmare when she left it, Noble wanted to have the peace of mind knowing that she had done her best to protect them. Slow down, we are getting close. Sarai squinted at the paper and then mentally calculated the distance. Noble tensed. They would need to disarm or avoid the obstacles on their way, or they would end up in a very sticky situation. Just another couple of steps. Wait, no. Stop now. The redhead's panic caused Noble to halt faster than her words. What is it? Noble gripped her sword, using her second sight to sense for enemies. The only thing she found was an anomaly on the wall that was unnoticeable to the naked eye. There was an invisible seam which ran the length of the wall and across the ceiling and floor. On the other side of the seam, which was hidden in the rock, lay a small pile of undisturbed ash on the floor. They had come to the first trap. The trap was insidious in nature. The tunnel looked like it continued straight forward, and perhaps it did for a short time, but walking forward would have been a grave mistake. Noble pulled a thread from her cloak and sent it floating toward the seam. It passed through with a crack and sizzle, only to add another thin layer to the pile of ash. That was a mistake a person would only make once. From the look of it, at least one person had. That's similar to what the big barrier does to keep out the corruption, Noble told Sarai. Leaning down, Noble beckoned the candle to come closer to the ground. That explains it. Obstructed by the ash on the other side, a set of runes was etched into the ground. From what Noble could tell, they were markedly similar to the runes circling the city. Except these obliterate everything. There must be a way around this. Noble's words came out more as a question than a statement. The other option was to try and use the bracelets to pass through, but that option held little appeal in case she was wrong. It looks like we shouldn't go that way at all, Sarai said after a moment. She turned to her left and lifted the light toward the wall. Sure enough, two circular indents were carved out of the wall. So the sorcerer made the bracelets and the arena as well. Noble mused. Though I'm guessing both of those came some time later. The bracelets held far more power than Amira's necklace. The chain around Sarai's neck was a pale copy of the golden bands, which is why it often failed Amira when she needed it most. The bracelets could only have been made by a true master of his craft. Kron had not mentioned the jewelry, but his grandson, who succeeded him, did. Ages were so strange here. The sorcerer likely lived through many of the following kings and queens' reigns. It was even possible that the one sent by the beast god still lived today, but somehow Noble doubted it. If he were still around, the powerful priest would have been the one to crown Amira, and Prafe did not exactly strike Noble as the ancient type. Receiving the bracelets in its grooves, the door swung open just like the last. Well, not exactly like the last. About halfway through the door began to creak as if it had suddenly become very heavy. With just enough momentum to carry it forward, the door clapped against the side wall with a deep boom. Noble removed the bracelets in order to pass through the door. She frowned. Was it her imagination or did they feel colder than they had before? Had opening both doors drained some of its power? Noble slipped the jewelry back securely on her wrists. This time the door did not shut behind them. It seemed to hang limply on its invisible hinges. Sarai noticed it too. Did we break the door? I don't think so. Maybe this one stays open until we leave. Noble pushed aside the uneasy feeling forming in her gut. She wouldn't listen to the whispers of doubt that liked to creep into her thoughts. They pressed onward until they arrived at the next pitfall, avoiding it with ease. The following three were likewise evaded with minimal effort. The next time, they were not so lucky. Sarai became distracted by something Noble said, causing her to miscount the steps. They wandered too far before turning right, and Noble only noticed the runes and the seam once it was too late. Oh! Noble braced herself to be obliterated by the barrier as she stepped back out of the line of fire. But this time, nothing happened. Thank goodness you were all right. Sarai clutched the papers to her chest as tears formed in her eyes. I'm so sorry. No harm, no foul, the floating awakened dismissed the apology. I guess that one is broken. I'm glad. The redhead breathed a sigh of relief. She consulted her papers again. I think there are 2 more to go. Noble couldn't help but note that the tunnels moved back and forth, sometimes switching back on themselves as they dropped to a lower level. With all of the off-shooting tunnels, the place would have been a labyrinth without Sarai's navigational guidance. I feel like I am heading to the center of the earth. How far below the surface they really were was hard to tell, but the coolness of the air around them continued to dip. Noble shivered, picturing just how devastating it would be if the earth collapsed. It never has in the Citadel. It should be fine here as well, she reminded herself. Pulling out her breadcrumbs, Noble checked to make sure that the translucent trail was still being made. The dull light it put off was as eerie as it was comforting. We are about to make a turn left and then a quick jog to the right, Sarai paused. And then, Noble could feel the other woman's sudden change in emotion. The redhead bit her lip lightly. Then, unless I am mistaken, I think we are there. So soon. Noble wasn't sure how much time had passed since entering the tunnels. Time seemed to move strangely here. It felt like it had been an eternity and no time at all. Maybe that is just the way it was when there was no sunlight to gauge time. They moved in silence another 50 meters following Sarai's instructions. Her near-silent footfalls still seemed to echo through the passageway. Then the steps stopped. Noble was unaware of how much the small amount of sound was impacting her until they were no more. She turned to look at her friend and noticed that even with the candle, her face was slightly obscured. But it wasn't just her face. The darkness seemed more oppressive here, like it had more substance to it than just a lack of light. "Do you have any light-emitting memories?" Noble asked her friend. "I would normally just use my fire." Sarai winced. Noble took the paper and candle. "Go ahead." With a deep breath, the redhead allowed a ball of flames to form in her hands. Noble flinched. Visions of her battle in the Great Hall flashed across her vision. She could almost hear her own scream when she thought she was going to die. She could feel the world closing in around her, a primal fear gripping her soul. It took great effort to push the questionable thoughts aside. She shut her eyes for a moment. "What is wrong with me? She is not Amira. She is Sarai." Speaking the name of light, Noble enhanced Sarai's flames. They suddenly burned much brighter, dispelling the darkness before them. Noble then understood why they were having difficulty seeing. The tunnel had opened into a vast cavern, much larger than anything they had seen thus far. Even with the extra light from Sarai's aspect, the ceiling could only vaguely be seen. But other things were now clear as day. The first of which was, they had arrived. Unlike the smooth tunnels, this large cavern was littered with stalactites and stalagmites. They looked like teeth ready to gobble them up without a second thought. But that was not all. Along the walls, veins seemed to spider along the rock in every direction. There did not seem to be any method to the madness, but Noble could not help but feel that their existence was inorganic. Sarai reached out and touched one of them. "They are warm. It feels powerful but not alive. They look oddly familiar." Noble took a step back after examining them at close range. "They look like arteries. Blood." Sarai chewed the inside of her cheek. "I read somewhere the beast god is also the god of blood. Then it would make sense that this is his handiwork or the work of his priest." Noble moved into the cavern with her candle to inspect the rest of it. Her senses told her that nothing was moving in the cavern, but there were too many obstructions from the unique features of the hall to discern much else. There was a soft rumble, but it ended as quickly as it started. "Is it my imagination or are those getting more frequent?" Noble opened her mouth to ask Sarai about it when something caught her eye. "Over here." Noble moved closer as she called to her friend. On a natural platform provided by the cavern, a stack of stone tablets was carved with great detail. The ladies quickly realized that the mysterious sorcerer of old had placed them there, carving them in stone to keep them from deteriorating in the humid environment of the dripping cave. Noble paused. She thought she felt something move, a presence, but it was gone before she could grasp hold of it. Was the old priest still watching over his work? "We will treat them gently," she spoke just in case. When nothing happened, the queen went back to focus on what was in front of her. This explains a lot. Among other things, the sorcerer had meticulously documented exactly what he had done to make the protective barrier. In 7 lifetimes Noble would never be able to recreate what he had done, so she skimmed the process with mild interest. There was also information on the bracelets which were on her wrists. As she suspected, the golden bands had been made by the follower of the beast god for the king and queen of Crestfall. Their purpose was not only to protect them and hide their power from curious eyes, but it also enhanced the wearer's powers. So that is what helped Amira have unreasonable ability. The former monarch might not have been a saint after all. If this were the case, then she had been able to augment her powers to a saint-like level with the bracelets. Did Bizes know about the jewelry's characteristics? He might have given them to his friend Derek both to hide him and to help him form his core. Brenna's father might have been even more generous than anyone gave him credit for. There was also some information about the institution of the confirmation ceremony. Wearing the bracelets was invigorating, but it could also be taxing. It was up to the wearer of the bracelets to bear the burden of leadership both mentally and physically. After Kron died from exhaustion, the priest instituted something akin to a doctor's check-up for the rulers. The ruler could either pass on leadership, or with the support of the royal family, could continue to rule. From Sarai's research, most rulers who made it 50 years took it as an opportunity to retire, but Amira had not selected that option. Why wouldn't she want a chance to take a rest? Noble wondered. Pulling her from her thoughts, Sarai gasped softly. My necklace. She touched her neck. What about it? Noble looked up from a tablet at her friend, suddenly concerned. I don't know how to explain it. It feels weird. Like the power running through it is gone. The redhead frowned. I also noticed it last time I removed the bracelets but kept on the chain. But this time is it more pronounced, maybe because I left the bands behind completely. You think the necklace feeds off of the bracelet? Noble wondered at the thought. If the one who constructed the chain was not skilled enough to make it work on its own, then maybe they had tied it into the magic of the bracelets. The necklace was the only thing keeping Amira from turning anyone who looked at her the wrong way into a crisp. Even then its power was not absolute. She still lost her temper and had difficulty reining it in. The necklace could only suppress so much, and as Amira's power grew beyond awakened, the balance of power between her and the necklace had been thrown off. Since Amira had no idea that Noble possessed the second set, Amira would naturally assume that losing power would mean losing the bracelets that went with it. But that means Amira was stuck being queen until she died or risked lighting up the whole city with her angry flames. I wish she had told me, not that she was exactly the sharing type. To be fair, Noble hadn't told her about Business's bracelets either. She touched them now, wondering at how cold they felt. The metal had felt humming with energy before. Maybe Sarai was wrong and the cavern was suppressing all magical objects. Noble suddenly felt a small sense of dread. Whispers of what could happen if her ability was taken flooded her head. Let's hurry up to find all we can and get out of here. Noble tried not to show her angst. Sarai's flames flickered. She felt the same. They couldn't leave just yet, not until they found out the location of the heart. Sarai read a tablet a second time. It says right here that the protective array is fueled by essence. If I flood it with essence, I think I can tap into that power to find an anomaly. That might tell us where the heart is. Noble thought about it for a moment. We should try it together. You have more of the raw power, but if it works, I might be able to use my special sense. The floating awakened wasn't sure if this was true, but she didn't like the idea of Sarai trying a risky maneuver alone. Together the women selected two of the arteries on the wall that were close enough to reach each other if something went wrong. Noble set down the loosened taper on the ledge and took hold of the stone with both hands. Ready. Noble's eyes swirled. On a silent command, they both sent essence into the strange rock, unsure what to expect. The stone took the energy and pulsed with it, glowing red before spreading the crimson light through the discolored rock face. A moment later the whole place was glowing from the floor to the ceiling. Was that there before? Sarai pointed to the center of the room. Noble turned to see a glowing pedestal surrounded by a circle of stalagmites. I'm not sure, but if I were the sorcerer, that is where I would keep a priceless object I didn't want to lose. As Noble and Sarai let go of the wall, the red light began to fade ever so slightly. The redhead pursed her lips and circulated her essence. The light grew brighter. Sarai took a deep breath. That should hold it for a moment. Noble looked warily at the strange pedestal. Let's take a look, but if the heart is there, remember not to touch it. We will figure something out when we know more. Understood, the beautiful former queen nodded. Together, the ladies picked their way across the treacherous terrain to the center of the cavern. What they saw was not the heart of the Lord of the Mountain. It was a body. Noble could smell the blood before she saw it. At first, it had been overpowered by the earthiness of the cave. But the closer she came to the pedestal, the more the sickening smell of death filled the air. A woman was sprawled out on the ground, her face covered by her loose hair. Blood surrounded her head. She must have hit it on one of the sharp stalagmites when she collapsed. Noble's heart clenched. Dismissing the candle from the table and summoning it into her hand, Noble confirmed what she already knew. Pen. Tears stung Noble's eyes as her stomach threatened to empty on the ground. She bent down and used her ability to gently pull back the woman's hair. Pen's eyes were open, her face frozen in an agonizing scream. It can't be. Sarai placed her hands on her heart. She blinked, wishing desperately for the scene before her to change. We just saw Pen when she brought us breakfast. How could she even get down here? She could have copied the map you have. It would explain why it took so long for her to get it to us. Noble pursed her lips. That only explained how the girl had navigated the tunnels, not how she had gained access in the first place. Wouldn't she need bracelets like we did? Both ladies looked toward Sarai's wrists. Remember how Pen bumped the table when she left? Noble pulled up the image in her head. What if it wasn't an accident, and it was a distraction to take your gold bands? It would explain why Sarai didn't reflexively grab them when she headed out of the room. The bracelets hadn't been there to begin with. She doesn't have them now. Or at least she isn't wearing them. Sarai allowed her hands to light with fire to add more light to the scene while Noble gingerly checked Pen for the missing bracelets. They aren't here, the queen observed when her search was complete. Was she attacked? Sarai tensed, looking around the cavern for any sign of another intruder. But nothing moved in the red light of the hall. For now, at least, they were alone. Noble took a deep breath. I think she died of shock. One look at Pen's face told her that much. Something had killed her before she ever hit the ground. And the only wound was on her skull from when she hit her head. No. That's not true. Don't touch her skin. Sarai sucked in a sharp breath. Up until that point, Noble had only used her ability to check the woman and search her clothes. If whatever had caused her death was somehow dwelling inside her, direct contact could spread it with dire consequences. But Noble did not think a nightmare creature had caused this. The barrier was meant to keep them all out. Something else was responsible. It will be fine. Noble took Pen's palm and studied it. Her digits were curled in a partial fist, locked in place. Prying back the fingers, Noble saw hideous black veins spreading out like a web across her pale skin. Noble frowned. Pen had been holding something when she died. Straightening, the floating awakened examined the pedestal. What do you make of this? Dousing her flame, Sarai carefully avoided the fallen maid and came alongside her. Her eyes flicked between the dead girl and the platform before finally settling on the latter. In the strange red light of the cavern, the pedestal looked like a black vertebrae protruding from the ground. There's nothing on it, Sarai observed. Noble shook her head. Not anymore. I think Pen took it. She has the scorch marks to prove it. But it is gone, just like the bracelets. The redhead furrowed her brow. The queen nodded, her face tense. Someone was down here with her. Counsel. Sarai's question was barely a whisper. Unless Pen was an accomplice of one of the kingdom's enemies. Noble wasn't sure which option she liked less. Either way, we have to find the heart. The red light wavered and began to fade, pulling both women from their shock. We should get out of here. Noble looked down at Pen with a solemn expression. We will have to come back after her once we figure all this out. Noble felt guilty leaving the woman behind. Even if she had stolen the heart from its home, she had paid for it with her life. She was a good servant. Noble pulled her eyes away. They needed to get out and find counsel immediately. There was no time to lose. The heart is gone, Sarai balled her fists. We were so close. It was right here. Don't. Noble's warning was a moment too late. Sarai tapped the platform with her index finger. She screamed. The red light pulsed, coming to life once more. Noble's bracelets suddenly glowed softly, the metal warming against her skin. But Noble wasn't concerned with all of that. She dove, pulling Sarai away from the black vertebrae. For a split second, Noble felt a vast amount of power be pulled from her like a vacuum. It was excruciating. The two women flew free of the platform and lifted into the air to avoid slamming against one of the sharp stalagmites. Sarai hung limply in Noble's arms as they hovered in the air. Sarai. Noble jolted her with a bit of emotion, though she also felt drained. The necklace around the redhead's neck glimmered briefly and she gasped. Her eyes popped open to meet Noble's. The pedestal. Sarai's heart raced. It's enchanted. I know. I felt it too. Noble lowered them both to the ground slowly. The pedestal was constructed by the sorcerer for a very specific purpose. It was made to pull power from whatever touched it. That was why the old kings had said not to disturb the heart. When Pen had taken the ball, the indiscriminating platform had sucked power out of her as well. Since Pen wasn't an awakened, she hadn't been able to withstand even a moment of the torturous ordeal. It was a painful death, but Noble hoped it had been mercifully brief. The queen's eyes widened. The room had lit when Sarai had touched where the ball had been. The bracelets and even her friend's necklace had regained some of their life. Did that mean the heart was powering them? And if it was, what else was it responsible for? If the ball's power was as immense as she now suspected, then there might be no reasonable limit to what it could fuel. That meant, the ground rumbled. A deep feeling of dread overcame Noble. Whispers filtered into her mind and she struggled to untangle what was plausible and what wasn't. She looked back at the platform. The heart had been sitting on what looked like a bone. A familiar-looking bone, and the stalagmites and stalactites. They resembled teeth. Pushing back the extra feelings, Noble lifted into the air again and flew around the platform. Finding the right perspective, she froze midair. No, no, no. Oh no. She grabbed her head. What? Sarai wished that she could have the same perspective as her friend. Noble leveled her gaze, a new sense of determination in her eyes. We have to go. Now. Not waiting for a response, Noble pulled out the breadcrumbs and flew toward the exit. Thankfully Sarai was able to keep up with her quickened pace. There was no need to use the map on the way out, which was good. Noble wasn't sure how good she would be at avoiding the traps with her frantic state of mind. Though she suspected that with the heart gone, they were no longer active anyway. When she reached to the exit to the arena, the door was slightly ajar. The opening was just big enough for a person to slip through. One less problem. Noble pushed through the exit and into the darkened arena. The lucent taper bathed the room in a dull light. Kosi was not there. Oh. Noble blinked. The room was fundamentally altered. The smooth walls were marked with all sorts of scars that had not healed. A few spots were gone altogether. Did we come out in the wrong spot? Sarai stared in confusion. Noble scanned the walls and shook her head. No, I think like everything else, the magic of this room was tied to that chamber down there. Without it, Noble, blast it, can you hear me? Nick's voice rang in her head. By his frustration, this was not the first time he had tried to reach her. She must have just gotten back in range. I'm here. You need to get out here. We have a problem. Nickel's voice was urgent. The queen tried not to let the man's tone scare her. If this is another assassination attempt on Sarai, then we have bigger problems. You're going to want to come outside, came the mysterious answer. Noble sighed. I'll be there in a moment. Slight detour, Noble told her fiery friend. Nick needs us outside. Now. Sarai blinked. That's what the man said. Floating toward the stairs, Noble did not even bother stepping as she hurried along. Sarai chased after her. But counsel. I'm already on it. Noble nodded. Kosi was not at the top of the landing as she had hoped. It was unlike the Simkus to leave her. Had he fled when the arena lost its facade? I hope he is all right. Kosi's absence troubled her more deeply than she wanted to admit. Noble would look for the beloved creature as soon. General Theo. Noble spotted the soldier as she raced through the foyer. The faithful servant of Crestfall halted the men with him and bowed. Your Majesty. An important relic is missing, she told the general. I need you to find and detain counsel at once. He may be in possession of the item. Either way, he has vital information. Whatever counsel's involvement, he needed to be located immediately and questioned. Check in the library first. Noble remembered that was where they had been studying. Yes, Your Majesty. Theo pounded his fist to his chest and turned to face the men with him. His orders were sharp and direct, but Noble did not stay to hear. She rushed toward the front hall and then under the stained glass window. Nick was waiting for her in the plaza in front of the palace. He stopped his pacing, visibly relieved to see them unharmed. What took you so long? Noble bit back her retort and answered honestly. We were under the palace, so it took a moment to come. But we are here now. What was so important that you couldn't just say it? Look. Nickel pointed up. The ladies stared at the sky but only saw the clear expanse overhead. I don't see anything, Noble admitted. Me either. Sarai scratched the back of her head. And that doesn't bother you? Nickel asked seriously. He looked up again with a complicated expression. You are going to have to spell it out for us. Noble bit her lip. She could feel that all around them, everyone was agitated. The barrier is gone, the man in black explained. It flickered a few times before disappearing. That's why the sky doesn't have the shimmering quality to it anymore. Your Majesty. A soldier ran up to her and dropped to one knee. We have a problem. I know about the barrier, Noble answered quickly. Her stomach dropped as she felt the soldier's emotions. The men at the city wall, they have seen movement from the mountains. Without waiting for further explanation, Noble lifted to the sky over the city. Her heart beat wildly in her chest. Off in the distance, barely visible inside the clouds of roiling ash, an army of abominations was leaving its home. And with the heart being freed of its cage, there was little doubt that their master would follow shortly behind. Just great. Noble circulated her essence as she tried not to panic. The creatures were far off. They were moving with an intensity she had not seen the last time, but they would still need some time to travel. Finding counsel and the heart were still the priority. Returning to the ground, Noble's face was grim. They are coming, she said simply. And the Lord? Nickel asked evenly. I didn't see him, but he is sure to be close behind. We will deal with it when it comes. There is a more pressing issue. The heart has been taken from below the city and we think council has it. Just great. Nickel cursed under his breath. I'll take care of him. We need to find him first to question him. If he doesn't have it, we need to know who does. Our main goal must be to keep the tyrant and his minions from destroying the city. Noble simultaneously worried about and wanted to strangle council. What was he thinking? Noble's eyes swirled with conflicting emotions as whispers of doubt crept into her mind. The earth rumbled. Again, Noble shot her friends a questioning glance to confirm her suspicions. The earthquakes are getting more frequent, Sarai eyed the ground nervously. And more intense. Nickel nodded. When we arrived, they were barely noticeable. That doesn't bode well. For the third time that morning, Noble felt her stomach drop. You mean the earthquakes have been going on this whole time? The man in black furrowed his brow. You haven't noticed? I guess not. Noble rubbed her forehead. As she was always floating, there would have been no way for her to know that the ground was moving unless she could hear the rumble. Small movements would have been completely unnoticeable to the hovering queen. Which meant that while council had eaten the earth away with his poison, he hadn't caused the aftershocks. Which meant, Noble balled her fists. This day just keeps getting better and better. The ground shook more violently, this time visibly shaking the buildings. Noble turned just in time to see the beautiful stained glass window crack. It shattered. Pieces of pink and green tinkled down like crystal rain. Noble shielded her eyes as the shards plummeted to the ground all around her. A teardrop panel the size of her head landed at her feet. Looking at the familiar piece of glass, Noble wanted to cry. She lowered her arm and eyed the other two with a solemn expression. Change of plans. Again, we need to get everyone to the north side of the city. If I'm not mistaken, the earth is about to split in two. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.